Chapter 761, Escape. Chapter 761, Escape. Upon the arrival of the Rakshasa race, Yin's eyes first flashed with shock. Thereafter, he gradually realized something and was delighted. The heavens are on my side. Yin was way too smart and realized before long that this might be his only shot at escaping. Su Zimo did not have much of an impression towards the primordial 9 races. After all, that was an era long forgotten. In Su Zimo's opinion, there were good, bad, kind and evil people from every race. That was the case even among the human race. However, the Rakshasa before him targeted his Great Chen Imperial Seal and Coiling Dragon Seal from the get-go, that ignited Su Zimo's killing intent. It was clear that this intruder was hostile and wanted to kill for his treasure. Su Zimo was expressionless and put the Great Chen Imperial Seal and Coiling Dragon Seal away in his storage bag. You have a death wish. The Rakshasa in midair was enraged when he saw what Su Zimo did. He smirked coldly and revealed blood-stained fangs as he declared with a cold voice. Suddenly Yin spoke and said darkly, Su Zimo, let's stop fighting and escape to survive respectively. Escape. Su Zimo shook his head. Be it up in heaven or down in hell, there's nowhere left for you to run. Fufu, the Rakshasa race has already arrived and you can't even guarantee that you can get out alive. Yet you want to kill me? Yin laughed coldly. Additionally, even if you can survive, can you guarantee the same for your friends back in Myriad Phenomenon City? Su Zimo's heart sank. In truth, the moment the Rakshasa appeared, he thought about how many of them there were. If this was not the only one, where were the other Rakshasas? The god race that abducted Nian Qi had not shown themselves as well. Where were they now? Could the appearance of the Rakshasa and god race in the ancient battlefield be the reason why the phenomenon ranking was brought forward this time round? Uneasy thoughts bubbled in Su Zimo's mind. Su Zimo, I'd advise you to hurry back to Myriad Phenomenon City as soon as possible to check up on your friends and spirit beasts. You might be able to salvage their corpses if you get back earlier. Yin said as he retreated. Su Zimo's expression darkened instantly and a furious glint flickered through his eyes. He strode forward and said coldly, I'll make sure I kill you before I return. How dare the two of you ants ignore me? The Rakshasa in midair widened his eyes and shrieked, feeling as though his dignity had been challenged severely. There was no way he knew that the two people before him were the top 2 of the phenomenon ranking. They could be considered as the strongest paragons of this generation and rare monster incarnates of history. Even Yin's first reaction upon seeing the Rakshasa was not to escape, let alone Su Zimo. Yin believed that if he was in peak condition, he was definitely strong enough to defeat this Rakshasa before him. What truly threatened Yin was Su Zimo still. Yin retreated rapidly while Su Zimo chased hot on his heels. The two monster incarnates ignored the Rakshasa completely. A dark streak of light tore through the air. Before it arrived, Su Zimo already felt his scalp prickling. The Rakshasa had attacked. He was furious that Su Zimo ignored him and put away the Great Chen Imperial Seal and Coiling Dragon Seal. As such, his first target was Su Zimo. How fast? Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. Even if he was in peak condition, he might not be able to reach that level. However, Su Zimo cultivated the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the Great Wilderness and possessed the ability of precognition. The cicada senses autumn coming before the wind even starts to blow. His body flattened and he was almost stuck to the ground like an anaconda. While he dodged the dark light, he slithered through the grass in Yin's direction without a decrease in speed. In Yin's view, Su Zimo had vanished from sight and was hidden in the grass. Click, clack, click. The grass swayed as though an ancient anaconda was slithering through it with a ferocious aura. Pust. Yin's expression changed and he felt his scalp prickle. Without hesitation, he punched in reverse violently. Su Zimo's body suddenly turned soft against that incomparably tough attack. He propped both arms onto Yin's body and wrapped around him. He released Anaconda Coil right after avoiding Yin's punch. Yin was petrified and hissing sounds echoed beside his ears, as though a massive wind box was being pulled constantly. It was Su Zimo opening his mouth to breathe in. Su Zimo's body expanded at a visible speed and blood qi surged as he released a terrifying pressure to constrict Yin's body continuously. That was a killing move from the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the Great Wilderness. The number 1 perfected being of the North region, Wuxia of Glass Palace, died in Su Zimo's hands from this technique as well. Today, Su Zimo was going to murder the once #1 perfected being of Tianhuang mainland using Anaconda Coil as well. Crack, crack, crack. A jarring sound echoed from the light barrier around Dian, and it flickered as though it could shatter at any moment. There was no way he would be able to defend against the constrictive power if the light barrier shattered. All of a sudden, a cold glint flashed and sliced towards the throat. This was a rare opportunity to kill Dian, and there might not be another chance as such if this was missed. Although he sensed the danger, Su Zimo's body continued wrapping around Dian's body while exerting strength. At the same time, he struck towards the cold glint with his left hand. "You must have a death wish." The voice of the Rakshasa sounded. Clang. A metallic sound could be heard. The cold glint froze and revealed its appearance. It was a chilling saber that curved with a shocking degree. Right now, Su Zimo grabbed the curved saber in his palm. However, his palm was perfectly fine without any wound at all. Su Zimo's left hand was equipped with the Khanate grade spirit glove he obtained from the Glass Palace Paragons and would naturally not get injured. The Rakshasa was momentarily stunned. However, he broke out of his stupor instantly and sliced again with a cold gi towards Su Zimo's throat at an extremely fast speed. With no other choice, Su Zimo withdrew Blood Quencher with the back of his hand and slashed forward. Clang. The blades of the sabers collided. The Rakshasa's body shuddered and a look of shock flashed through his eyes. The strength of this human cultivator was boundless like the ocean and impossible to defend against. Although it was merely a single slash, he could already feel his arms go numb and his curved saber nearly flew from his hands. Impossible. Humans are innately weak with a cheap bloodline. They're the most inferior ants around. How can there be a cultivator as such? I can't fight against him in terms of strength. In a flash, the thought crossed the Rakshasa's mind and he stopped underestimating his opponent. In the blink of an eye, he appeared behind Su Zimo. His movement technique was absolutely unfathomable. In order to defend against the Rakshasa, Su Zimo had to free both hands. However, he could no longer restrain Dian with just his arms and waist. Herg? Dian grunted deeply and the sound of bones cracking echoed from within his body as his tendons and bones sounded together. Suddenly, his body shrank and he seized the opportunity to escape from Su Zimo's coil. Fufufu. Dian sprinted into the distance and laughed sinisterly. Su Zimo will meet again in the future. I'll definitely take my revenge during our next encounter. What a pity. Su Zimo looked at Dian's fleeing figure and lamented internally. He was entangled by the Rakshasa and could not afford to continue his pursuit of Dian. Furthermore, he was indeed worried about Myriad Phenomenon City. There was no way to determine how much more time he had to spend if things with Dian continued to drag out. I've got to kill this Rakshasa and hurry back. At that thought, Su Zimo shrugged his wrist and Blood Quencher buzzed loudly with an immense blood chi. Su Zimo caressed the blade gently and said with a murderous tone, "Brother, today I'll let you know what the blood of a Rakshasa tastes like." Chapter 762, Killing a Rakshasa. Chapter 762, Killing a Rakshasa. An unusual fluctuation appeared in the void behind. Su Zimo did not even turn back and released a slash with an icy gaze. Splash. The sound of tsunami surged and a blood beam expanded. The sound of metal clashing did not echo as expected as the slash missed. The Rakshasa had already dodged a moment earlier and was at Su Zimo's side. Ha! The Rakshasa exclaimed softly with a mocking, cruel tone, "To think that you've cultivated to the tsunami blood realm. Not bad. Your flesh must be exceptionally delicious. Dreaming of eating my flesh? You truly don't know what's good for you." Su Zimo sneered. "And, I think even at this point, you've yet to notice who your opponent truly is." The Rakshasa shrieked, "I'm from the noblest race of the primordial era, the Rakshasa race of the primordial 9 races. We once ruled over the 10,000 races and ants such as yourself were not even worthy of carrying my shoes." With his agile movement technique, the Rakshasa circled around Su Zimo continuously, appearing left and right, distant and near. His movement technique was unpredictable like a phantom. Su Zimo changed his saber technique continuously, tough and resolute for a moment and soft and fluid for another. However, the Rakshasa refused to fight him head-on and separated at every single touch. "Hee ant, you can't even touch my sleeves." The Rakshasa laughed gleefully. Su Zimo stood on the spot and frowned slightly. If he was in his peak condition, he could definitely match the speed of the Rakshasa by channeling his golden core and inner core at the same time to release his blood chi in a burst of his body. However, his spirit energy was almost entirely depleted after his massive battle and pursuit of Nian. He truly could not catch up to the Rakshasa with just his inner core, blood chi and burst of his body. I don't mind telling you something else. The Rakshasa harumphed coldly. The spirit wings that you cultivated was a secret skill created after you humans observed the movement techniques of our Rakshasa race. Unfortunately, humans are way too stupid to comprehend even a fraction of the obscurity of our Rakshasa race's movement technique. The bloodline of the human race is way too cheap and you guys are innately impossibly weak. There's no way you can control the secret skill of our Rakshasa race with ease. It was true that Ethereal Wings was inspired from the Rakshasa race. Unfortunately, humans and Rakshasas were two different races at the end of the day. The structure of a Rakshasa's body and even their bloodline had evolved after a long time. Coupled with their wings, they had almost zero resistance when they flew in the air. However, humans had a distinctly different body from the Rakshasas. Naturally, Ethereal Wings could not attain the same speed of the Rakshasa race as well. Suzimo's face was calm as water and he thrust Blood Quencher into the ground. His arms slumped naturally and his eyes were half shut. He could not be bothered to converse with the Rakshasa. He was trying his best to empty his mind and maintain a state of clarity. You want to wear me out? The voice of the Rakshasa sounded once more. I travel through the air just like how you humans walk on the ground. I don't feel fatigue at all. And you can't wear me out. Suzimo remained silent. The Rakshasa was biding his time to search for an opportunity to strike. It was the same for Suzimo. One of them was active and the other was passive. Although they did not have any physical contact, both of them were filled with killing intent that once burst, would definitely result in the death of either one. The Rakshasa was extremely careful and did not charge recklessly. He merely tested the waters continuously. However, Suzimo was immobile like an old monk in meditation. I heard that you've got some friends back in Myriad Phenomenon City. After a short stalemate, the Rakshasa suddenly spoke. Let me remind you that those friends of yours should have become food for our Rakshasa race by now. Ah. The Rakshasa laughed cockily. There's more than 100 from our race that entered the ancient battlefield this time round. Myriad Phenomenon City, a sacred haven for the human race, will become a slaughter field for our Rakshasa race. Suzimo's arm quivered slightly as though he was dealt a grave shock mentally. It was an opening that was hard to detect. However, the Rakshasa's eyes were extremely sharp and instantly recognized it as a rare opportunity to strike. The killing intent in his eyes intensified and he charged towards Suzimo in a flash. The opening lasted for a brief glimpse at the very most. However, in a fight between top-tier experts, especially a Rakshasa with that terrifying speed, the brief glimpse was all that was required. A glimpse would decide victory or even life and death. All of a sudden, between his swaying black hair, Suzimo's eyes jolted open with a glaring glint and a hint of mockery. Not good. The Rakshasa was alarmed when he saw the look on Suzimo's face. He must have revealed that opening intentionally. I've been tricked. It was too late by the time the Rakshasa realized it. That glimpse was also enough for Suzimo. The Rakshasa channeled his bloodline and forcibly switched directions. He adjusted his angle of motion and fled into the air at an extremely fast speed. His reaction time was the absolute fastest. The Rakshasa believed that even if Suzimo was prepared, he would not be harmed. However, his expression changed starkly the next moment when he saw what happened from the corner of his eye. Suzimo did not chase and merely stood motionlessly on the spot. Unknowingly, a gigantic moon-colored bow that shone with 6 spirit patterns had appeared in his hands. He pinched a dark gold-colored arrow with 2 fingers and it shone with 6 spirit lights as well. The moon concealment bow and black gold arrow. 2 connate spirit weapons. After the battle at the Great Chen ruins in the north region, Suzimo was down to a last black gold arrow. Right now, he was ready to launch the arrow in his palm at any moment. Buzz. Bow like a full moon and arrows like shooting stars. By the time the Rakshasa heard the buzzing sound of the bowstring, the black gold arrow was already close to him. Although Suzimo could not match the Rakshasa with his movement technique, the burst of his 2 connate spirit weapons could. The Rakshasa was rather impressive as well. Even with his passive position, he managed an evasive maneuver and avoided fatal damage to his vitals. The black gold arrow tore through the Rakshasa's meat wing and created a hole of blood the size of a bowl. Those were not any ordinary bow or arrow. Those were Khanate spirit weapons. Although it seemed like it was merely a hole of blood, the power within it was enough to cripple one of the Rakshasa's meat wings completely. The flesh of the wing exploded and his tendons and bones were snapped. Ah! The Rakshasa yelled miserably. Suzimo did not stop at all after firing the arrow as he withdrew blood quencher that was embedded into the ground. He stomped and soared into the air with a boom. His motion was fluid as water and the Rakshasa had no time to react at all. Slash! He released a thunderous roar that sounded almost at the same time as the Rakshasa's yells. A blood beam expanded and slashed down viciously along the Rakshasa's body, seemingly able to rip through the void. The Rakshasa with half his wings crippled was like a bird with snapped wings. After losing the greatest advantage of the Rakshasa race, the Rakshasa was on the verge of falling. He could barely stabilize himself, let alone dodge Suzimo's lethal slash. Blood spewed and sprayed from midair. The tall and bulky body of the Rakshasa was cleaved into two in the middle by blood quencher and his organs splattered down with a retching stench. The top half of the Rakshasa fell onto the ground and his eyes dimmed. He was not dead yet as blood flowed out from his mouth. He glared at Suzimo with eyes that resembled a dead fish and stuttered. "YUW will definitely die here. And my leader W will take our revenge for me. Die in peace. I'll slay your Rakshasa leader together so that he can accompany you in hell." Suzimo strode forward and ruptured the Rakshasa's head with a stomp. Chapter 763 Darkest Chapter. Chapter 763, Darkest Chapter. The duration of their fight could be considered as extremely short. However, no one outside the fight could understand how dangerous the situation was. If Suzimo was mentally affected by the Rakshasa's words and had indeed revealed an opening, or if he had been a teeny bit slower, he would have been the one laying on the ground. Suzimo glared at the Rakshasa's corpse with a dark gaze. Most of what the Rakshasa said was true. Suzimo was not a saint and had never thought of rescuing everybody. However, with the fates of Little Fatty, Monkey and the others unknown in Myriad Phenomenon City, he knew he definitely had to check things out. The situation in Myriad Phenomenon City seemed dire. Perhaps it might be even worse than he had imagined. A single Rakshasa was already so troublesome to deal with. Suzimo truly did not have much confidence if there were truly more than 100 Rakshasas in Myriad Phenomenon City. Furthermore, through the dead Rakshasa, Suzimo discovered that there was a Rakshasa leader as well. The strength of the Rakshasa leader might be comparable to a nascent soul. Naturally, the safest option right now was to consume elixirs and recuperate on the spot. Even if he could not recover to his peak condition, he had to recover his spirit energy by at least 80% before returning with his golden core phenomenon. That was the safest option. However, Suzimo was truly worried about Little Fatty and the others. The more he thought about it, the more uneasy he felt. After a momentary silence, he decided to return to Myriad Phenomenon City immediately. "Please let nothing happen to them," Suzimo murmured softly with a cold gaze. In a flash, he sped in the direction of Myriad Phenomenon City. Blood chi surged into the skies and vengeful spirits surrounded Myriad Phenomenon City. On the streets, the roofs and every single corner, splinted limbs and cold corpses could be seen. It was a terrifying sight. The dark lights in midair were still hovering around. Sinister laughters could be heard everywhere. Every single Rakshasa whisked a barely alive cultivator in their hands. They chewed off flesh in huge mouthfuls and their eyes shone with green, excited glints. Of the 100,000 paragons, close to half were dead and even more were injured. "I've already said that no one is allowed to leave without my permission." The god race leader stood in the air and looked down at the incomparably frightened cultivators below. Although his tone was calm, it possessed an unquestionable authority. Nobody dared to challenge the god race. Anyone that challenged the god race only had death awaiting them. Gradually, some of the cultivators stopped their attempts to flee and their eyes were filled with endless despair. Some of them stood on the spot stiffly and gazed at the corpses in the cesspools of blood with blank expressions as though they've lost their souls. "Very good." The god race leader's lips curled and gave a chill remark. "As long as you guys stay here obediently, I won't kill unreasonably nor would I consume you guys as food like the Rakshasa race." In the eyes of the god race, humans were extremely cheap and their flesh were incomparably dirty. They could not bring themselves to consume something this lowly. Humph. When he heard that, the Rakshasa leader in midair harumphed coldly and raised his arm before hollering, "Clansmen, have you had your fill? My stomach's almost bursting." "Enjoyable." A Rakshasa roared in laughter. The Rakshasa leader nodded and waved his hand before declaring, "Ants of the human race, listen up. As long as you guys stay in Myriad Phenomenon City obediently and not harbor any thoughts of escaping, the Rakshasa race can spare your lives for the time being as well. Leader, although we've had our fill of eating, we haven't had our fill for killing." A Rakshasa shouted, unable to contain the excitement in his eyes. "What do you know?" The Rakshasa leader smiled sinisterly. "If we kill the humans, their flesh won't be fresh anymore. I intend to rear them in Myriad Phenomenon City as food for us in the future." "You sure are wise, leader." Many Rakshasas shouted in unison as their eyes lit up. Perfected Lord Yu Jun trembled in rage when he heard that. Monkey Lu sighed deeply. When he saw everything that was happening, it was as though he could feel the despair and helplessness of the human race back in the primordial era when they were subjugated by the 10,000 races. More cultivators stopped in their escape attempts. They had almost no shot at survival if they continued fleeing away from the city. If they remained in Myriad Phenomenon City, they could at least remain alive for a period of time. "Nian Chi is in the hands of the god race, I can't leave. You guys leave first and look for first. Don't let him return here no matter what." Ching Ching had a conflicted expression and eventually made the decision after mulling momentarily. Little Fatty and the others did not recognize Nian Chi. However, Ching Ching could see it clearly. The woman with her hands and feet bound by the god race was none other than Nian Chi. "I won't leave either if you're not leaving." The spirit tiger suppressed his fear and thumped himself on the chest with a firm look on his face. "Don't worry, Hubadian will be here with you. These intruders from other races will have to get by me before they can get to you." Ching Ching was touched and looked at the spirit tiger with reddened eyes. "We're not leaving either." Monkey's scarlet eyes flickered as he said calmly. "Brother Monkey, there's no need for that. We're sworn siblings, so we naturally have to go through thick and thin together." "That's right. Thick and thin." The golden lion nodded as well and gripped his fists. Little Fatty scratched his head and turned to look at Lung Ro and Lin Xuanji in an undecided manner. Lin Xuanji gave a bitter chuckle. "There's no way I'm going to leave. Myriad Phenomenon City was established by Enigma Palace. As the current generation's disciple of Enigma Palace, this has to be my burial ground even if I have to die." Ji Qingtian's eyes shone brightly as he said in a dark manner, "Let's stay here as well. Right now, most of the cultivators have chosen to stay in Myriad Phenomenon City and only few are fleeing out. If we make any reckless move, we'll definitely become a target for the Rakshasa and God race." "All right." Everyone agreed. "Everyone gather around these three nascent souls." The Rakshasa leader looked at Perfected Lord Yu Jun and the other two and said in a mocking tone, "Why are you moving so slow? Do you have a death wish?" A cultivator who was severely injured and staggered was chided by a Rakshasa. Instantly, his head was sliced off and he was killed on the spot. The remaining cultivators were horrified and made haste. Everyone from the god race stood with arrogant expressions with their hands behind their backs. There was no pity in their eyes as they watched coldly from the sidelines. Before long, the cultivators in the city were gathered together in a dense group. With the support of Perfected Lord Luo Shui, Perfected Lord Yu Jun struggled to stand up and look down. There were more than 100,000 human paragons in this place just yesterday. Now there were only around 50,000 left. Half of the cultivators had turned into cold corpses that were in eternal slumber. Tragic. Half of the remaining 50,000 cultivators were injured as well and would end up as food for the Rakshasa race. Nobody will be spared. Tears streamed down the face of Perfected Lord Yu Jun as his lips quivered. After a moment, he chose to remain silent and his voice was converted to a deep sigh. The Myriad Phenomenon Peak was behind them. The mountain peak was established here in the ancient era and had witnessed the birth of countless paragons and monster incarnates as well as the rise of the human race. It witnessed the fights and clashes of the ancient emperors. But now, the mountain peak was made to witness the massacre of 100,000 paragons by intruders of a foreign race. This day would eventually become the most humiliating and darkest chapter of the history of the human race. Chapter 764, Unyielding Humans. Chapter 764, Unyielding Humans. Gooey fresh blood seeped between the gaps of the stone slabs in a grisly manner. More than 100 Rakshasas circled around the remaining cultivators, and their massive feet left behind bloodied footprints on the stone slabs in a frightening manner. The tall and massive bodies of the Rakshasa and their pitch-black meat wings exerted immense pressure. Within the group, many cultivators shivered with lowered heads. They did not dare to face the menacing faces and green eyes of the Rakshasa race. The atmosphere was turning extremely repressive. In fact, many cultivators were wary about how they breathed, afraid that they might draw the attention of the Rakshasa race with any activity. Ha 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 ha. The Rakshasa leader was delighted when he saw that and reared his head in laughter. So, these are the so-called paragons of the human race. How worthless. Nobody refuted him. Lin Xuanji and the others had cold expressions. Although their hearts were blazing with rage, they repressed their emotions. The god race leader stood in the air and swept his gaze across the cultivators gathered beneath indifferently. Most of the cultivators here can't be considered as paragons. He paused for a moment before changing the topic, smirking in a carefree manner. I heard that there's a total of 108 spots on the phenomenon ranking of the human race. Only those that are able to get a spot on the phenomenon ranking can be considered as true paragons of the human race. Ha! The Rakshasa leader grinned. His gaze fluttered as he declared loudly, "Who are the paragons of the phenomenon ranking? Stand up and let me take a look at you." He placed emphasis on the word paragon, and his tone was murderous. Everyone could hear the killing intent in the Rakshasa leader's tone. Originally, a listing on the phenomenon ranking was an immense honor for cultivators and they would gain fabulous rewards as well. But now, the phenomenon ranking was a mark of death for these cultivators. Nobody stood out. Anybody that stood out would die. Foo-foo. The Rakshasa leader laughed sinisterly. I'm going to start killing people if nobody comes forth automatically. A stir broke out amongst the crowd. Please spare my life, senior. I'm willing to follow you and be your slave or spirit beast. Finally, a cultivator that could not handle the pressure fell to a thud on his knees before the Rakshasa leader with a frightful expression. It was Duan Qingping of Clear Wind Temple who was ranked 20 on the phenomenon ranking. He was definitely able to be considered as a paragon of the human race. However, at that moment, Duan Qingping knelt before the Rakshasa leader without any shred of dignity and begged for his life loudly. In fact, he was willing to be a spirit beast and slave of the other party. Nobody mocked him. Even the perfected Lord of Clear Wind Temple died in the hands of the god race leader. What more could he do? All ants were afraid to die, let alone him. Most cultivators cultivated for the purpose of longevity. Even perfected lords, mighty figures and patriarchs might not truly be able to let go of their attachments towards life and death, let alone him who was a golden core. You want to be my slave and spirit beast? The Rakshasa leader gazed coldly at Duan Qingping as he said slowly, the human race is not worthy. He gave a cruel laugh and severed Duan Qingping's head with a slash. With a whisk, he grabbed Duan Qingping's head in his hands before smashing it and drinking its brain juices in large mouthfuls. The Rakshasa leader whisked Duan Qingping's head and burst into laughter. Fufufu paragon? Phenomenon ranking? You're only worthy of being food for us. The 100-odd Rakshasa race beings roared in laughter and their appearances turned even more menacing, resembling malevolent ghosts that crawled out from hell. Intruders of a foreign race, you deserve to die. Suddenly, a hoarse voice sounded from the crowd. At that moment, it appeared particularly striking. The crowd fell into an uproar. Many cultivators spun around towards the voice. Everyone wanted to see who was the person who dared to leap out with that declaration despite the situation where they could barely save themselves. The laughter of the Rakshasa race came to a sudden stop as well. The Rakshasa leader's face turned ashen immediately. A figure walked out slowly from within the crowd. The cultivator wore black robes and had black hair, but his face was frighteningly pale. He was injured and seemed extremely weak while his gaze was somewhat hollow and stoned. However, the person gave off an extremely sharp aura. He possessed an unparalleled boldness as he walked out from the crowd. Number 7 on the phenomenon ranking, Dugu Jian. Blood qi was torrential and corpses were strewn everywhere in Myriad Phenomenon City. Nobody could imagine the pressure he had to endure to step out despite the circumstances. Many cultivators had conflicted expressions when they looked at that lonely figure. Some were in revere, some were in pity, and some were numb. Within the crowd, Hang Qiuyu slumped his head as he looked at Dugu Jian step forward. He lost to Dugu Jian in the fight for the phenomenon ranking. However, he had never acknowledged defeat even once in his heart. The two of them had a long way to go in the future. It was only at that moment that Hang Chuyu realized he had lost completely. Sword cultivators specialized in cultivating their ferocities. They cultivated their determination and pushed forward no matter what. However, his sharpness had disappeared completely in the face of the Rakshasa race's massacre. Yet, Dugu Jian's sharpness remained and was only being honed deeper. He pointed his sword towards the Rakshasas. "Very good, you are very good." The Rakshasa leader twisted his neck with crackling sounds and laughed menacingly with a violent gaze. "Who else is indignant? Step forth. Count me in." Another voice sounded in the crowd. While it was a little tender, it was incomparably resolute. It was Su Xiaoning. This timid girl had changed significantly after experiencing the passing of her kin. At that moment, she mustered great courage and stood forth. Although the Rakshasa race is one of the primordial 9 races and you have a noble bloodline and great innate strength, so what? During the ancient era, the primordial 9 races lost and the Rakshasa race did as well. All you could do was live life ignobly. Although we humans are innately weak by birth, we won't allow ourselves to be trampled upon by you foreign races and be slaughtered by you indiscriminately. Her words were powerful and her tone was robust. Many cultivators were worked up and their fighting spirits were even ignited. Ha 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 ha. The Rakshasa leader mocked and looked at Xiaoning and Dugu Jian before bursting into laughter. "Two mere ants and you think that's enough to form a rebellion? Count me in." Lin Xuanji stood out with grit teeth. "Rakshasa race, this is a sacred place for the human race. Every single tile here was crafted effortlessly by Fairy Ling Long. Even if I have to give up my life, I'll guard this place and never back down." "Me too." Demonist Ji stood forward. "Me as well." Little Fatty shrugged his rotund body and squeezed his way out. "Count me in. Count me in." Shi Jian, Ji Qingtian, Lung Ro and the others stood forward. Voices sounded within the crowd one after another. Perfected Lord Luo Shui's eyes reddened. Monk Yin Lu's eyes turned damp as well. Perfected Lord Yu Jun was emotional and his body trembled. Those were true paragons. Those were the hopes for the future of the human race. During the ancient era, it was precisely because paragons stood out one after another to fight against the 10,000 races. Every single generation preceded the previous and they fought against the primordial 9 races, creating the current status quo. The human race was unyielding and would fight. Even if they might not be able to win, they would not yield. That was the spirit of the human race, their soul. Caw-caw. Monkey's inner core circulated and his body expanded. Demonic chi shrouded around him as he thumped his chest furiously with a raring battle intent. He burst into laughter with a scarlet glint in his eyes. "Rakshasa race? What nonsense. I've had it with your ugly faces for a long time." Roar. The spirit tiger and golden lion let out roars one after another as well and walked forth from the crowd. Chapter 765 Hidden Night Spirit. Chapter 765 Hidden Night Spirit. Night Spirit did not speak nor did he revert to his true form. He merely stood out in silence and stood behind Xiaoning expressionlessly. His pitch-black eyes revealed a conflicted emotion. It wasn't fear. It was more like cautiousness. Nian Qi's hands and feet were bound by the god race and she had a worn-out expression. Her withered yellow hair covered her peerless features. Her head was slumped the entire time as she remained silent. "Fu-fu." The god race leader raised his brow and said with a fake smile, "Seems like it's been a long time since the Rakshasa race has been out. Even these little pets dare to challenge you guys. You look more like a little pet." Since they were already in this state, the spirit tiger no longer had any reservations and shouted, "Your tiger daddy here isn't going to change my name. I'm Hubadian. You must have a death wish." The god race leader's face darkened. The Rakshasa leader burst into laughter. "Seems like the god race isn't that much better off either. Even though I don't consume the flesh of humans, I heard that the bones of tigers are great tonics. Leave that spirit tiger to the god race." The god race leader looked down with an arrogant expression and said indifferently, "For me, killing you is as simple as squashing an ant. Lest you claim that I'm bullying you, I'll spare your life if you're even able to defeat the weakest clansman of the god race." The moment he said that, someone from the god race stood out. He had golden hair, azure eyes and exquisite features as he glared at the spirit tiger with a deadly intent. "Do you think I'll be afraid of you?" The spirit tiger grit his teeth and stood out boldly. To be fair, this was the best possible scenario. Although the Rakshasa and God race leaders were both at Golden Core realm as well, they could kill nascent souls that were above their cultivation realms. The spirit tiger was definitely not a match for them. However, if he was up against an ordinary Rakshasa or God race being, he would have a shot at victory. The Rakshasa leader was delighted and laughed menacingly. Anyone that can defeat my clansmen can have your lives spared as well. Since you guys have death wishes, I don't have to stand on courtesy. Monkey walked right to the front in huge strides and thumped his chest with both arms, yelling murderously, "Who dares to challenge me?" The tension on both sides was high. How dare a demon monkey act so insolently? You're asking to die. A Rakshasa spread his wings and soared into the air, charging towards Monkey in a flash. That single action caused a massive fight to break out on both sides. Apart from the God race that sent one person to fight against the spirit tiger, the Rakshasa race also sent 13 people to fight against Xiaoning, Little Fatty, Leng Ro, Ji Qingtian, Shijian, Mingzhen, Demonist Ji, Monkey, Qing, Night Spirit, Little Fox, the Golden Lion and Dugu Jian. No matter it was the solo God race being or the 13 Rakshasas, all of them possessed frightening combat strength. However, Little Fatty and the others were at different levels. Monkey had a torrential ferocity and had the advantage against the Rakshasa with his powerful strength, steely fist techniques and agile movements. The Rakshasa could not get close to him at all. Mingzhen was number 4 on the phenomenon ranking and had a stable foundation. He also knew many secret skills of the Buddhist sects and was protected by the world-cleansing Green Lotus. He was equally matched against the Rakshasa. Ji Qingtian, Leng Ro and the others could only manage to defend passively. Xiaoning, Qing and the others were in extremely treacherous situations the moment they exchanged blows. They could die at any moment. Xiaoning was a disciple of Elixir Yang sect. She surpassed everyone in the same cultivation realm in terms of elixir refinement. However, her combat strength was not stellar. How could she fight against the Rakshasas? Clang. The Rakshas's curved saber transformed into a cold streak of light and was about to slice Xiaoning's throat when it was repelled by 5 fingers that darted out of the blue. The fingernails were incomparably sharp and shone with a dark glint. A trail of sparks was released when it clashed against the curved saber of the Rakshasa race. It was Night Spirit. Night Spirit broke free from the attacks of a Rakshasa behind him and had unknowingly appeared beside Xiaoning to rescue her. "Stand behind me." He wasted no time to elaborate and left that remark before shielding Xiaoning behind him. The Rakshasa that was initially chasing after Xiaoning was enraged when his prey that he was about to get his hands on was taken away from him. With that, he charged towards Night Spirit. At the same time, the Rakshasa that was initially fighting Night Spirit closed in as well. 2 Rakshasas attacked at the same time. Night Spirit had a cold gaze and agile movement techniques. His figure flickered non-stop where he stood like a phantom and left a series of afterimages. He was not disadvantaged even against 2 opponents. You are rather capable to be able to defend against 2 Rakshasas. The Rakshasa leader crossed his arms and sneered. Although Qing possessed wings as well, her movement technique was way inferior compared to the Rakshasas. Poof! A flash of bloodlight appeared. In less than 3 breaths, Qing was injured. Although it was not fatal, blood gushed out endlessly from her wounds. Qing's face was pale and had already lost her balance. She was on the verge of falling from midair. Die! The Rakshasa was excited and yelled before slashing down. Swash! Another figure flashed past and rescued Qing from the curved saber of the Rakshasa. It was Night Spirit again. After rescuing Qing, Night Spirit fought against 3 Rakshasas. No matter how frightening the movement techniques of the Rakshasas were or the sort of angles they attacked from, everything was negated as Night Spirit defended every single move. The 3 Rakshasas failed in their slaughter attempts and were instead injured themselves. The Rakshasa leader's expression darkened slightly as he glared at Night Spirit in silence. Night Spirit's situation drew the attention of the 3 nascent souls as well. Perfected Lord Luo Shui asked in surprise, "What is that spirit beast? His movement technique isn't inferior to the Rakshasa race?" "That's not all." Monkey Lu shook his head. "Don't forget he has yet to revert to his true form. In other words, he is not at the peak of his combat strength right now." Perfected Lord Yu Jun frowned slightly without saying anything. He was thinking about the reason why. Why was Night Spirit not reverting to his true form even at this point? What was he trying to hide? What were his considerations? Ah! Suddenly, an exclamation sounded from the crowd. Little Fox had failed to bewitch a Rakshasa and was almost killed when Night Spirit rescued her. The bloodline of the Rakshasa race is noble and possessed an extremely frightening memory of their legacy as well as secret skills and cultivation techniques. There was no way a Rakshasa could be bewitched by Little Fox so easily. At that moment, Night Spirit was already fighting against 4 Rakshasas single-handedly. In less than 10 breaths, 3 people were defeated. Furthermore, the situation of the others was not looking good either. They could die at any moment. Although Jianghu was on the phenomenon ranking, his rank was close to the end. Finally, he could not withstand the relentless attacks of the Rakshasa anymore and his phenomenon shattered. A cold light flashed. By the time Jianghu reacted to it, the light was already close to him. It was too fast. Ugh. Jianghu closed his eyes and sighed internally. Clang. The sound of metal clashing echoed. Brother Ji, back down. I'll help you. Lin Xuanji waved the folding fan in his hand and repelled the Rakshas's curved saber to rescue Jianghu. His blood chi and spirit energy was released completely as he fought against 2 Rakshasas. The disciples of Enigma Palace had never partaken in the fights for the phenomenon ranking. Nobody knew how strong they were. At this moment, many cultivators finally witnessed the capabilities of Lin Xuanji. This was a true paragon of the human race. Although he was fighting against the Rakshasa race, there were no signs of weakness and he did not back down at all. Chapter 766 Heaven Fiend Dance. Chapter 766 Heaven Fiend Dance. Poof, poof, poof. A flurry of talismans danced in midair with spirit light spilling everywhere, but none of them could defend against the Rakshas's curved saber. The protection talisman on Lung Ro's body was penetrated before long. Shoo. In a hair's breadth, a pink-colored ribbon tore through the air and rescued Lung Ro from the brink of danger. Demonish Ji was at the other end of the ribbon. Lung Ro's face was pale as she said softly, "Thank you. Demonis, you think that you're capable enough to fight 2 of us." The Rakshasa that targeted Lung Ro shifted his cold gaze onto Demonish Ji. Boom. Demonish Ji's golden core phenomenon could not withstand the combined attack of 2 Rakshasas and dispersed immediately. Even for Rin Tu and Pang Yu, who were paragons that were on the top 10 of the phenomenon ranking, they could not defend against the Rakshasa race without the protection of their golden core phenomenons. Swish. 2 figures streaked through the air and Demonish Ji was flustered for a brief moment. However, she composed herself before long and a demonic glint shone in her beautiful eyes. Right in front of everyone she displayed an extremely beguiling technique. She tapped on the ground with light steps and her figure shuttled through the cold streaks of light, but she was completely unharmed. The speed of the Rakshasa race was absolutely earth-shaking. All the cultivators present could count themselves lucky if they could survive a couple of attacks. However, Demoness Ji managed to avoid the killing move of 2 Rakshasas with her movement technique. Not only that, she did not panic against the 2 Rakshasas and there was an indescribable beauty in her movement. Her pink figure seemed like it was dancing on the blade of a sword and was incomparably charming. Her movement is a little odd. Perfected Lord Luo Shui said softly. Perfected Lord Yu Jun mulled for a moment before jerking his head to exclaim, "That's the Heaven Fiend dance." Ah! A series of exclamations could be heard at the mention of Heaven Fiend dance. Legend has it that the Heaven Fiend dance was the secret skill that brought Fairy Ling Long to fame. Although she was not rendered the status of an emperor, Fairy Ling Long was able to match the attacks of any emperor relying on that movement technique. There were even legends that said that emperors fell head over toes for Fairy Ling Long after witnessing her Heaven Fiend dance. That was the most renowned secret skill of the ancient era. Although Enigma Palace was established by Fairy Ling Long, that secret skill was not passed down. To think that the Heaven Fiend dance would reappear on Demonish Ji. There's no mistake. Perfected Lord Yu Jun said deeply, when the human emperor's palace appeared 20 years ago, this pure maiden of the fiend sex entered it as well. She must have learned the Heaven Fiend dance from the human emperor's palace. It did not resemble a movement technique at all. It was more like she was truly dancing. Demonish Ji's figure was elegant and her feet were light. As her skirt fluttered, she displayed her figure perfectly and revealed a sensational charm. The sharp saber lights brushed past her body by a hair's breadth. As time passed by, Demonish Ji's movement became increasingly fluid and an invisible aura was formed around her. Her aura encompassed the two Rakshasas. Both of them looked flustered and their movement techniques became sluggish as though they had stepped into a swamp. Humph! The Rakshasa leader's expression turned grim as he harumphed coldly. Initially, he thought that his clansmen would be able to crush all the ants in less than 10 breaths. To think that they were having some issues. Do you need the god race to give you a hand? The god race leader tilted his head and asked with a smile. The Rakshasa leader grit his teeth. No. On the other side. The spirit tiger's massive body was sent flying by a single punch from the god race being, and he rolled dozens of feet on the ground in a wretched manner. His head was spinning and he could no longer recall if this was the 5th or 6th time it had happened. At that moment he was injured from head to toe. He was completely defeated in terms of strength and speed. He was not a match at all. If the spirit tiger did not fuse his palm with the 4 claws of the divine being of the tiger race back in the astral dragon sputum lair and underwent a complete transformation, his body would have been ruptured by the god race being a long time ago. The spirit tiger felt that he was already at his limits to be able to survive till now. Roar! He growled deeply and attempted to struggle and stand up. However, he knelt onto the ground with a thud. It's over. The god race being strode over in huge steps and reached out, thumping down onto the spirit tiger's massive head. If the hit landed, a bloody hole would definitely appear on the spirit tiger's forehead. All of a sudden, a dark figure that resembled a figure appeared out of thin air and punched out, colliding against the god race being's fist. You're asking for death. The god race being merely laughed in contempt without even making out who the intruder was. No matter who it was, anyone that tried to take the god race head-on in melee combat to challenge their physique and blood chi merely had a death wish. The god race being channeled his golden blood chi and he shone brilliantly like a divine being. His aura rose intensely and the sound of tsunami even echoed from the surface of his fist. Bang! The two fists collided. The moment the flesh and bones collided, a dull sound of defeat echoed. The expression of the god race being froze and his initially disdainful gaze vanished immediately. He frowned and staggered 3 steps back as though he was in considerable pain. A god race being was knocked back by someone else. Everyone focused their attention and were dumbstruck. It was Night Spirit. Unknowingly, Night Spirit managed to break out of the focused attack from 4 Rakshasas and charged over to punch someone from the god race and rescue the spirit tiger. You have a death wish. The god race being was enraged and charged towards Night Spirit. At the same time, the 4 Rakshasas arrived. Right now, Night Spirit was fighting against 4 Rakshasas and a god race being. However, there were still no signs of his defeat. The god race leader narrowed his gaze and his eyes flickered. This was getting interesting. What was this thing that was able to match the Rakshasa race in speed and the god race in strength? Almost at the same time, the Rakshasa and god race leaders exchanged glances. The god race leader smiled gently and asked, "Can you tell what's the background of the man in black?" "I don't care what he is. At the very most, I'll step in personally to kill him once and for all." The Rakshasa leader replied coldly without any expression. "That's true." The god race leader nodded. "Although he is fast and has decent strength, he's far off when compared to us." Just as the two leaders were chatting idly, something changed on the battlefield. The golden lion finally failed to defend and was slashed across the back by a Rakshasa. Almost cut into 2, he fell to the ground severely injured and passed out on the spot with blood gushing out. Xiaoning rushed over hurriedly. Night Spirit frowned slightly and a brutal killing intent flashed through his deep eyes briefly before vanishing. Roar! Monkey shielded the golden lion behind him and his eyes shone with a bloodshot shade. He let out a deafening roar and completely entered a berserk state. His bloodshot eyes seemed like they possessed boundless strength. In his berserk state, Monkey triggered the power in the depths of his bloodline and his strength and speed exploded. He had almost no sanity left and the only thought in his mind was to kill. Furthermore, he could not experience pain on his body. Among the 7 sworn siblings, apart from Night Spirit and Su Zimo, Monkey was the strongest. Monkey was even more frightening in his berserk state. Chapter 767 Return. Chapter 767 Return. The curved saber of the Rakshasa punctured Monkey deep in the chest and was less than half an inch away from his heart. As though he could not experience any pain, Monkey's eyes were bloodshot and his ferocity was not diminished. He extended his thick arms and grabbed the Rakshasa before him. The Rakshasa had swift reflexes and wanted to withdraw his curved saber and soar into the skies instantly. However, Monkey's flesh and bones hardened and caused the curved saber to be stuck for a moment. Get down? That brief moment was all it took for Monkey to grab the Rakshasa's meat wings and yank the latter down from midair. Boom. There was a deafening sound. The Rakshasa smashed onto the ground heavily and created a gigantic pit with dust and gravel flying everywhere. It was a heavy smash and the Rakshasa let out a tragic cry. His blood chi was dispersed and his bones felt as though they were going to break. Gagaga. Monkey grinned and grabbed the Rakshasa's meat wing with one arm. With a whirl, he yanked the Rakshasa out of the pit and smashed the latter fiercely onto the other side. Bang, bang, bang. He repeated it thrice in succession. The Rakshasa was severely injured from the smashes and was barely breathing. The Rakshasa race had a frightening bloodline. If it was any other living being, they would have been smashed into sludge. A cold streak of light appeared stealthily. Another Rakshasa charged over. Although Monkey was in a berserk state and had lost his rationality, his reflexes were sharp. Instantly, his tall and mighty body curled into a ball. The shift was rather intuitive and he managed to avoid the fatal attack of the Rakshasa. Monkey's motions did not stop at all as his body suddenly spread open, pushing towards the Rakshasa as though he was offering an immortal fruit. That was a killing move from the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. Crackle. After Monkey's massive body curled up and unfurled, his tendons shuddered and his bones rang to release an unparalleled strength. Because the movement technique of the Rakshasa was too swift, it was already too late for him to avoid the move. Bang. Monkey's hands pushed up violently against the Rakshasa's lower jaw. Snap. The jarring sound of bones cracking echoed. The gruesome head of the Rakshasa was tossed back fiercely and his lower jaws were smashed. With a twist, Monkey chased forward and his arms sank down, thrusting his elbows into the chest of the Rakshasa like twin spears. The Rakshasa's body smashed onto the ground with 2 bloody holes in his chest. His heart was punctured and he died on the spot. The crowd fell into an uproar. Instantly, the tides on the battlefield had shifted. Nobody expected the 2 Rakshasas that initially had the advantage to wind up injured and dead. This was the first time that the Rakshasa race had been dealt such a blow since they entered Myriad Phenomenon City. Although none of the cultivators present dared to protest, all of them cheered in their hearts. Although there are more than 100,000 paragons, only few of them dare to step forth. They're not even comparable to these few demon beasts. What a tragedy. Perfected Lord Yujun lamented sorrowfully. It did not matter even if a Rakshasa was killed before them. The situation was not going to change. As long as the Rakshasa and God race leaders were to attack, they would definitely overwhelm everything in a domineering manner and nobody would be able to get out alive. Right at that moment, 2 figures that were clashing together suddenly separated. Dugu Jian staggered with a frightfully pale expression and was drenched in sweat. It was clear that he was thoroughly exhausted, at his limits and could no longer continue. The Rakshasa that faced him had a calm expression and stood on the spot motionlessly. A moment later, the glint in the eyes of the Rakshasa gradually dimmed. Everyone focused their attention. An eerie scarlet line appeared on the Rakshas's glabella. It became increasingly clear and eventually, a drop of fresh blood oozed out of it. It was a fatal sword strike. The Rakshasa's head was sliced apart. The sword strike was so swift that the wound closed on itself instantly, resulting in the bizarre scene. Another Rakshasa was dead. In truth, Dugu Jian was injured to begin with and was suppressed by the Rakshasa the entire time. However, Monkey's intense battle earlier on distracted the Rakshasa for a brief moment. Dugu Jian cultivated the Tao of the sword and his focus was crystal clear. His heart of the sword gave him clarity and he was extremely sharp towards anything that happened in outside world. He spotted that brief opening instantly. His sword strike was a fatal blow. While the Rakshasa was fast, his sword was faster. Although it was only a single strike, he exemplified the terrifying killing power of the Tao of the sword to its greatest extent. His sword strike seemed like it was sending a message to everyone. Even the primordial 9 races are not invincible and will die. Even they can't deal with the sharpness of the sword Tao. The Rakshasa leader's expression was completely ashen after 2 of his Rakshasa clansmen were killed in succession. Good strike, good strike. He clapped with a cold gaze and said frostily, "Initially, I was considering whether I should spare your lives. But now I've made up my mind. The Rakshasa leader snarled word by word murderously, "None of you human paragons shall dream about leaving Myriad Phenomenon City alive. You're dishonest, reneging on your words." Xiaoning glared furiously as she pointed to Dugu Jian and Monkey. "It's clear that they won." "Dishonest?" The Rakshasa leader stared at Xiaoning and sneered, "I'm the one that sets the rules, so I decide what happens. Ants like you aren't worthy of negotiating with me. I'm going to have all the paragons on the phenomenon ranking buried here. The Golden Core phenomenon ranking is the greatest joke of your human race. From this day forth, the phenomenon ranking shall become history." Nobody spoke and the atmosphere was tense. It was as the Rakshasa leader had said. If the paragons on the phenomenon ranking were all dead and more than 100,000 paragons were buried here, the phenomenon ranking would become the greatest humiliation of the cultivation world. Even if the phenomenon ranking was established by Fairy Ling Long and had been passed down from the ancient era, Enigma Palace would be too ashamed to carry on hosting it. "I'm afraid to disappoint you," Dugu Jian said coldly. "The top two of the phenomenon ranking have left Myriad Phenomenon City a long time ago. Those two are the true paragons of our human race. True monster incarnates who are comparable to the human emperor. I'm merely 7th on the phenomenon ranking, but I'm already able to slay you Rakshasas. If those two monster incarnates are here, there's no way you intruders of foreign races will be able to maintain that cockiness." The two monster incarnates that Dugu Jian was referring to were Su Zimo and Dian. He. The Rakshasa leader sneered, "Paragons? Monster incarnates? Those two must be scared out of their wits such that they don't dare to return, right?" His words resonated with the thoughts of many cultivators present. If they were in the same position and saw what happened in Myriad Phenomenon City, they would have chosen to flee far away instead of returning to the city. Even the nascent souls had to avoid this and chose to flee. What did it matter if they were paragons on the phenomenon ranking? The situation right now was extremely clear. Myriad Phenomenon City was an endless hell and anybody that entered will not have a chance to leave. The Rakshasa leader rubbed his chin and laughed menacingly. "If those two dare to return, I guess I'll give them a chance to survive. They can be my spirit beast slaves. Kill them." The Rakshasa leader waved and more than 10 mighty figures behind him transformed into streaks of dark lights that bolted towards Monkey and the others. Perfected Lord Yujun and the other two bore pained expressions. Naturally, they could tell that Monkey and the others were already at the end of the road. How could they defend against the attacks of more than 10 Rakshasas? Ah! Suddenly, a long howl sounded from the distant horizons, tearing through the clouds and shattering metal and rocks. Everyone was shocked. Ah! The moment the first howl landed, a second howl sounded. The second howl was even closer. Chapter 768, How Dare You? None of you shall be spared. Chapter 768, How Dare You? None of you shall be spared. The intruder did not bother to conceal his tracks and charged right into Myriad Phenomenon City. Moreover, his speed was shocking. The first howl was distant, but the second howl was already close to Myriad Phenomenon City. Many Rakshasas paused in their tracks and turned towards the sound. Little Fatty and the others were invigorated when they heard that voice. Perfected Lord Yujun and the others were first stunned. Thereafter, they could not help but stand up, as though they had recalled something. Many cultivators had lost expressions. For most of them, the howl did not sound familiar. They truly could not understand how anyone would choose to barge into the Myriad Phenomenon City to their deaths given the circumstances. Could it be someone else from the primordial 9 races? Not long after, a figure sprinted in from outside the city. His green robes fluttered elegantly. Ah! When he came closer and everyone took a closer look, they could not help but exclaim. Su Zimo. The intruder was none other than the top of the phenomenon ranking this time round. He was the person who managed to cultivate 3 golden core phenomenons, suppressed Dian domineeringly and even dared to challenge nascent souls, Su Zimo. Everyone was worked up. Even perfected Lord Yujun and the other two were emotional. By some freak coincidence, Su Zimo managed to leave Myriad Phenomenon City and avoid this catastrophe. None of them expected him to make the decision to return. You are truly befitting to be number 1 on the phenomenon ranking. Dugu Jian spoke slowly and made the remark. This was the sort of courage that the number 1 of the phenomenon ranking should possess. This was the true boldness befitting of the number 1 perfected being. Little Fatty and the others could not help but cheer at the sight of Su Zimo's return. Although the remaining 50,000 cultivators did not cheer, they were much more spirited and positive as well. The Rakshasa and God race leaders could clearly sense the shift in the moods of the cultivators. The God race leader glanced at Su Zimo indifferently for a brief moment before retracting his gaze. He had seen too many of such paragons and monster incarnates, and killed too many of them as well. This person looked extremely ordinary. There was nothing special about him. He was long indifferent to things. The Rakshasa leader stuck out his grisly red tongue and smacked his lips. He glared at Su Zimo's body and sniffed carefully before murmuring in an intoxicated manner, "Yeah. To think that there would be such high-quality meat in the human race. How rare." Su Zimo's expression had been frighteningly grim ever since he entered Myriad Phenomenon City. Myriad Phenomenon City was dyed almost entirely red and corpses were strewn everywhere in a horrifying sight. Those cultivators had died in wretched manners. Many of the corpses were incomplete and there were clear signs of their bodies being chewed off. When he came closer and saw the injuries on Little Fatty and the others, the killing intent in Su Zimo's eyes intensified. They were almost corporeal and could spew out. Su Zimo swept his gaze through the crowd and lingered briefly on Perfected Lord Yujun's group. The situation was even worse than he had imagined. Of the dozens of nascent souls, more than half might have already died. Eventually, Su Zimo's gaze shifted onto Nian Qi. Nian Qi's head was initially slumped and she did not speak at all, nor did she acknowledge Qing Qing and the others. She was worried that she would implicate them. However, when she detected Su Zimo's gaze, Nian Qi could not hold it back any longer. Instantly, all the grievances she suffered surged into her heart as she bawled out in tears, "Mister! Don't cry, I'll save you." Su Zimo's voice was gentle. "Ugh." Nian Qi held her tears back and nodded with vigor. "Tisk." The God race leader could not help but laugh as he said idly with mocking eyes, "If I were you, I'd start thinking about how to save myself instead." The other 6 God race beings crossed their arms and burst into laughter. When Su Zimo approached, many cultivators gradually noticed something unusual. His spirit energy seems to be depleted. "Yes, I sense that too. How is he going to fight against the Rakshasa and God race like that? I heard that he's extremely strong in melee combat and can even take on a demon form. What's the use of a demon form? What demon can take on the primordial 9 races? Can he defeat nascent souls in his demon form? Those 2 leaders of their foreign races are even able to kill nascent souls." Many cultivators discussed in hushed whispers and their initial elation gradually sank again. Everyone could tell that Su Zimo was in a terrible condition. His spirit energy was almost completely depleted after his massive fight with Dian. He also had a long journey back without resting at all. In fact, he looked weathered by the time he returned to Myriad Phenomenon City. "Zimo, hurry and leave. Leave us." Suddenly, Perfected Lord Luo Shue's voice sounded in Su Zimo's mind. She was using her essence spirit to send him a voice transmission. Notwithstanding the fact that your spirit energy is depleted and you're unable to release your golden core phenomenon, even if you're at your peak condition, you might not be a match for the Rakshasa and God race leaders. Perfected Lord Yujun sent a voice transmission as well. "You possess specialties from the immortal, Buddhist and Fiend Daos and you're the hope of the human race. As long as you don't die, you will definitely be accomplished in the future. It's difficult for a lone tree to survive in a burning forest. The outcome here is determined and there's no need for you to force or blame yourself. This is fate." Monk Yin Lu sighed gently. "Patron Su, hurry and flee." Su Zimo remained silent. However, his expression was so cold that it was terrifying. Even if it wasn't for Little Fatty and the others, even if it wasn't for Nian Qi, Su Zimo would not leave. He was displeased. Ever since he entered Myriad Phenomenon City, he bore an anger in his heart that he could not vent. He could not stand by idly and watch as the foreign races trampled and massacred humans. This was Myriad Phenomenon City, a sacred ground for the human race. He cultivated the techniques of the immortal, Buddhist and Fiend Daos and secret skills of the human emperor to become number 1 on the phenomenon ranking. If he were to flee today, how would he be able to face the human emperor and Fairy Ling Long? Escape. Suddenly, the Rakshasa leader burst into laughter and said coolly, "You 3 old fogies intend for him to escape? Do you really think he can escape?" Perfected Lord Yujun and the other 2 were startled. The Rakshasa race could detect their voice transmissions using their spirit consciousnesses. Indeed, the primordial 9 races had unimaginable capabilities and it was difficult to defend against them. The thought of escaping hasn't crossed my mind. Right then, Suzimo turned around and gazed at the Rakshasas nearby with a calm expression. Slowly he said, I did not cultivate just so I can escape. I want to vent every bit of displeasure in my heart. I want to have peace of mind. I believe in an eye for an eye. All of you intruders from foreign races must die as well. Suzimo's tone turned increasingly intense towards the end and his killing intent surged. His voice was like a bell that shook the voids. I'll let you guys understand that this is a sacred place for the human race that shall not be sullied. Intruders of foreign races, how dare you? None of you shall be spared. By the time Suzimo's declaration was complete, Blood Quencher was already in his hands. Its blade buzzed and a blood beam expanded. Ant, you have a death wish. The Rakshasa leader was enraged and his eyes shone with fury. There's no need to use a sledgehammer just to crack a nut. I'll slaughter him for you, leader. A Rakshasa darted forward and spread his wings before transforming into a dark streak of light. He burst towards Suzimo at a terrifying speed. Kill? Suzimo did not dodge or avoid and circulated his inner core. He welcomed the attack and released a loud shout. The secret skill, Thunderclap Kill. The energy of the sound wave exploded instantly. With a brief pause in the Rakshas's movements, the blood beam shrouded over his head. There was nowhere for him to run. Clang. The curved saber and Blood Quencher collided violently. Suzimo's attack carried his wrath. As for the Rakshasa, his blood chi was almost completely dissipated after the burst of Thunderclap Kill. His strength was diminished and he was at his weakest. The difference between them was clear. Victory was determined with a single strike. Chapter 769 Massacre. Chapter 769 Massacre. The dark light paused briefly and revealed the Rakshasa. Poof. The Rakshasa spat out a huge mouthful of blood with a pale expression. His palm was split with fresh blood gushing and he could no longer maintain his grip on the curved saber. It was repelled instantly. I've got to escape first. This human is too strong and I can't win him in terms of strength. I've got to wrap around him and look for another opportunity. The Rakshas's reflexes were extremely swift and those thoughts flashed through his mind one after another. Swoosh. The meat wings of the Rakshasa flapped and wind howled. A tremendous power was released as he attempted to soar into the air and flee. Under normal circumstances, there would naturally be a brief respite between both parties after a full-on clash. However, Suzimo's body sounded with the sound of tsunami. His strength that was deteriorated after the collision received a fresh boost like the surge of a tide. That was tidal might. Suzimo had a cold expression and his movements did not stop at all. With the strength of tidal might, he leaned in and his saber force shifted. The blade released a slight vibration as though it was forming blood-colored ripples in midair. The blood-colored ripples smudged across the Rakshas's throat gently. His two attacks, one tough and the other gentle, were fluid as water without any delays at all. The tall and mighty body of the Rakshasa could not get out of Suzimo's saber force's range at all. Poof! A massive current of blood spurted out. A gruesome head was lopped high into the air with fresh blood spraying everywhere. The headless corpse of the Rakshasa collapsed stiffly onto the ground and writhed unconsciously. Suddenly the battlefield went silent. Nobody expected this outcome in the fight between Suzimo and the Rakshasa. Less than that, nobody expected Suzimo to kill the Rakshasa with 2 slashes. For any outsider, the entire process seemed fleeting and simple. However, nobody knew that Suzimo had used at least 3 of his trump cards in order to kill the Rakshasa. The Rakshasa's death was not worthless. The Rakshasa leader glared at Suzimo and said slowly, "Don't worry, I won't let you die so easily. I'm going to torture you bit by bit and have you suffer an existence worse than death." His smile turned more sinister as he waved. "Tie him up and kill everyone else. Spare no one." Understood. The many Rakshasas behind him agreed in unison. "When the battle breaks out, I might not be able to protect all of you. Everyone watch out." Suzimo glanced sideways and instructed Little Fatty and the others. The dangers in this battle were unprecedented. Even Suzimo was not confident about it. Notwithstanding the Rakshasa and God race leaders who could kill nascent souls, even the 100-odd Rakshasas that were about to attack were difficult to deal with. Night Spirit's expression changed and his gaze flickered. A moment later, it was as though Night Spirit had made up his mind about something. First, I'm going to fight together with you later. Night Spirit did not speak. However, his voice sounded inside Su Zimo's mind. Night Spirit was a spirit beast that was only at Golden Core realm, yet he could utilize the secret skill of nascent souls to send voice transmissions. Su Zimo looked at Night Spirit deeply. He was almost completely certain that Night Spirit was hiding a secret. Furthermore, it was a secret that had to be hidden. Previously, Night Spirit was even able to fend off 5 Rakshasas in the battle earlier on. Now that Night Spirit said that he was going to fight together with Su Zimo, it seemed as though he was implying something unusual. Kill? Many Rakshasas flashed and dozens of dark lights scattered throughout the voids in all directions, charging towards Su Zimo instantly. Even a nascent soul might not be able to escape from such an attack unscathed. However, Su Zimo had an unfazed expression as he swung Blood Quencher and released the saber techniques of the Sea Calming Manual and Azura Saber together. The saber forces were relentlessly tight and nothing could penetrate them. The Rakshasa race was smart and they were innately talented in combat. The moment they sensed Su Zimo's immense strength, they naturally chose not to take him head-on and instead circled around him continuously. On the battlefield, Su Zimo's figure almost completely vanished and he was shrouded by a blood beam around him that formed a blood-colored barrier. In the skies, streaks of dark lights danced and revolved while charging forward continuously. They attempted to destroy the defense of the blood barrier but to no avail. If this drags on, Su Zimo is going to be disadvantaged. That's right, the saber technique released by Su Zimo requires immense stamina and mental focus. He can't afford to be distracted in the slightest bit. However, the Rakshasas are merely dancing effortlessly in the air biding their time. Victory for them is almost guaranteed. Perfected Lord Yujun's group revealed worried expressions as they panicked. If Su Zimo could not break out of this, he would die of exhaustion. On the other end, more than 30 Rakshasas lunged towards Little Fatty and the others. Everyone had grim expressions. Su Zimo could defend against the combined attack of more than 10 Rakshasas. However, the most they could defend against were 2 Rakshasas. Furthermore, the spirit tiger was severely injured in his fight earlier on. Monkey's eyes were no longer bloodshot and his berserk state had worn off. The injury on his chest was deep and he was almost incapable of fighting any longer with his diminished strength. There were only a few of them who could continue to defend against the Rakshasas properly. Their situation was not much better than Su Zimo's. Little Fatty, Lin Xuanji and Demonist Ji stood forward and shielded the group with resolute gazes, as though they were prepared to die. Monkey, the spirit tiger and the other spirit beasts struggled to stand up with no hint of fear as well. The 50,000 cultivators remaining had conflicted expressions as they looked at the figures before them. Deep in their eyes, there were even hints of guilt and shame. Although they were referred to as paragons, they were scared out of their wits by the foreign intruders right now and even had to depend on the demon beasts before them for protection. For the first time, everyone felt as though they were not worthy of being called paragons. More than 30 Rakshasas lunged forward with an unstoppable might, as though they could shred everything in their path to pieces. Against the pressure, Little Fatty and the other 2 were drenched in sweat and felt immensely tense. Even their arms were trembling slightly. All 3 of their golden core phenomenons had already dissipated. Although Heaven Fiend Dance was the secret skill of Fairy Ling Long, it could not defend against the massacre of so many Rakshasas. While Lin Xuanji possessed a multitude of techniques, he also felt despaired and helpless at the moment. All of a sudden, just as the 3 of them were about to give up, a figure that resembled a phantom darted out from behind them. It charged towards the large group of Rakshasas without any decrease in speed. Ah! A series of exclamations came from the crowd. Who was it? Who was it that had no regard for his life? Was he trying to use his body to delay the slaughter of the Rakshasas? That would be a joke. As thoughts ran wildly through the minds of the cultivators present, that figure had already clashed against the large group of Rakshasas. A blood mist spread almost instantly upon collision. The figure vanished entirely as though it was smashed into sludge. However, the next moment all the cultivators exclaimed. A corpse fell from midair. It was the corpse of a Rakshasa. There were 5 holes the size of fingers on the head of the corpse and retching brain juices oozed from them. The Rakshasa was completely dead. This? Many cultivators were dumbstruck and their minds went blank. They could not figure out what was happening. The figure that initially vanished reappeared in midair like a phantom and brushed past another Rakshasa. It reached out and grabbed at an extremely terrifying speed. Snap. The Rakshasa's throat was crushed by its palm and it died on the spot. Night Spirit! Ching Ching exclaimed. A massacre had arrived under the guise of the night. Chapter 770 Heavenly Encompassing Formation. Chapter 770, Heavenly Encompassing Formation. In less than 3 breaths, 2 Rakshasas died in succession. Many cultivators watched with widened eyes and bated breaths in disbelief. The Rakshasa race was one of the primordial 9 races. They possessed a noble bloodline, a pair of meat wings and agile movement techniques. All the cultivators present had experienced the terror of the Rakshasa race. But now 2 Rakshasas were dead just like that. Furthermore, the cause of their deaths was practically unknown. Even for Monkey, the spirit tiger and the others who had watched Night Spirit grow up and were even sworn siblings with him now were shocked, let alone the other cultivators. While they knew that Night Spirit was strong, none of them expected him to be this frightening. More than 30 Rakshasas charged together at the same time and briefly later, 2 of them were dead. His capabilities and combat strength were out of this world. It's no wonder why I lost. The Golden Lion murmured. He suffered a loss the first time he met Night Spirit. Initially, the Golden Lion wanted to cultivate harder and seek an opportunity to get even in the future. At this point, that thought had vanished into thin air. The 3 nascent souls exchanged glances. All of them could see the shock and bewilderment in the other's eyes. The others might not be able to see the fight clearly. However, the 3 of them possessed spirit consciousnesses and could vaguely see the entire process of Night Spirit's fight with the large group of Rakshasas. It was shocking, perfect and frightening. Night Spirit was decisive and vicious without any bit of hesitation or stagnation. Every single strike was a killing attack. For the 3 of them, their first reaction towards the process was shock. Be it in terms of timing, angle, movement technique, speed, strength of burst or choice of target, Night Spirit's attacks were perfect. They were completely flawless. However, the more they thought about it, the more frightening it seemed. Even if the 3 of them were in peak conditions, they might not be able to defend against Night Spirit's attacks unscathed. Night Spirit was practically born to kill. From him, there was a faint, antiquated aura that was dark and cold. It was unsettling and sent chills down one's spine. At their cultivation realm, perfected Lord Yujun and the other 2 had broken free of the shackles of heaven and earth and their lifespans were at 1,000 years. This was a feeling that they did not experience even when they faced the Rakshasa race. But from Night Spirit's aura, the 3 of them felt a chill. Right as the 3 nascent souls were imagining things, another Rakshasa fell from midair with a hole in his chest. His heart was crushed. Night Spirit's figure was like a phantom. It was barely visible under the guise of the night. Although the attacks from the large group of Rakshasas were ferocious, Night Spirit was still able to identify gaps and avoid everything while retaliating. Initially, the God Race leader intended to just sit by idly and watch the show unfold. However, at that moment, he frowned as he glared at Night Spirit's figure. His gaze shone brightly as though he was in deep thought. The Rakshasa leader's face was frighteningly grim. At the same time, something else happened on another side of the battlefield. Om, ma, and I, pa, me, The 6 Sanskrit characters echoed like a resounding bell that rang through the world. The Sanskrit seemed as though they possessed the supreme noble strength of the Buddhist Tao. It was the Daming Mantra. The long-lost ultimate technique of Daming Monastery had reappeared in myriad Phenomenon City. The power of a single Sanskrit character was enough to rattle the mind of a cultivator. The combined burst of 6 Sanskrit characters shook the world and caused everything to quake. The weather changed and thunder even rumbled at the horizons of the skies in resonance. At the same time, the cultivators that were away from the battlefield felt their blood chi move and their heartbeats palpitated. However, for the dozens of Rakshasas in the battlefield, they were merely stunned momentarily. Their bloodlines were way too strong. Although the Daming Mantra was powerful, it did not have much effect on them. Right then Suzimo struck. Slash. Accompanied by a loud roar, the blood barrier surrounding Suzimo converged instantly into Blood Quencher in his hands. Immediately after, a blood beam burst through the horizons. Suzimo's blood chi burst forward as his black hair danced. He carved a gigantic blood-colored semicircular arc in midair that almost cut the entire world into two. Poof, poof, poof. There were at least 10 Rakshasas that were caught up in the blood beam. None of them could defend against that terrifying attack. 3 Rakshasas were cut into 2 on the spot. Even the curved sabers in their hands were shattered by Blood Quencher. Although the remaining Rakshasas managed to defend against the sharpness of Blood Quencher, their bodies could not withstand the burst power of the attack. They coughed out fresh blood and their gazes dimmed as they crashed onto the ground, severely injured. Clang, clang. After the refinement in the backyard at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley, Blood Quencher had become an extremely ferocious weapon. After consuming the fresh blood of the Rakshasas, it now looked sharper and even more terrifying. Its blade emanated a rich blood scent and it quivered excitedly. Lay down the formation. The voice of the Rakshasa leader sounded suddenly. It was chilling to the bones. Clang, clang. Rakshasas on both sides of the battlefield withdrew iron chains made from mystic metal from their storage bags. In pairs, the Rakshasas tugged on both ends of the chains. They made use of the speed of their movement techniques to circle and weave around Suzimo's surroundings. Suzimo's heart skipped a beat and he dealt with everything carefully. He did not dare to be careless. The chains were rather flexible. When Blood Quencher slashed at them, it felt as though it was hitting air. Suzimo continued to wave his Blood Quencher but he could not release the might of his saber. Instead, the room he had available for maneuvering decreased by the moment. Before long, a chain was coiled around his body. Suzimo frowned. There were imperceptible, tiny sharp spikes that were hidden on the chains. They were only revealed after the chain was coiled around Suzimo's body and pierced into his flesh. Even with his powerful physique, Suzimo could not defend against the sharpness of the spikes. His brief moment of distraction caused another chain to coil around his arm twice, restricting the power of Blood Quencher completely. This is bad. Perfected Lord Luo Shui gasped. More chains coiled around Suzimo's body. The more chains there were, the more difficult it was for Suzimo to break free. Now that the threat of Blood Quencher was gone and Suzimo was trapped in a massive formation, the victory of the Rakshasas was almost guaranteed with their agile movement techniques. One after another, like anacondas, the chains coiled around Suzimo's arms, thighs, chest, back and body tightly and revealed their sharp spikes to tear into his flesh. In the blink of an eye, there were already many chains around Suzimo. The Rakshasa leader's expression loosened up as he laughed menacingly. Why aren't you struggling anymore, Ant? This is the heavenly encompassing formation of our Rakshasa race. Even the barbarian race of the primordial 9 races won't be able to break free from this, let alone ants such as yourselves. There were dozens of Rakshasas and each of them held a chain in their hands as they stood in midair and looked down at Suzimo with mocking gazes. Fufufu. Suzimo stood on the spot motionlessly and suddenly let out a laugh. You think that you can trap me using these pieces of scrap metal? Chapter 771, Unmatched. Chapter 771, Unmatched. An inner core revolved slowly within Suzimo's chest and shone with a demonic glint. It illuminated his chest inside and outside, creating a blood-colored glow. Even his ribs and beating heart could be faintly seen. A terrifying aura began to spread. With each breath Suzimo took, a scarlet demonic chi would gush out from his nostrils and circle around him. It slowly became richer and purer. Against the shroud of that aura, even the cultivators present felt pressured, let alone the dozens of Rakshasas in midair. He actually has an inner core? The eyes of the Rakshasa leader shone. An inner core was equivalent to the golden core of cultivators and was the foundational basis for a demon beast's strength, possessing all the essence of their entire cultivation. An inner core that was this pure was definitely a great tonic for any living being. Behave yourself. A Rakshasa yanked the chains and it clanged loudly. The chains were lined with spikes. His tug naturally caused the spikes to tear in the flesh and created a miserable ripping sensation in the body. Suzimo did not move at all and his gaze was ice cold. As though he could not feel the pain in his body, the ferocity in his eyes intensified instead. Lowlife kneel. The dozens of Rakshasas had a tacit understanding. They exerted strength and flapped their wings at the same time, tugging at the chains. Instantly, dozens of chains became extremely taut and tense, creaking loudly. Many cultivators winced at the sight of that. This scene resembled a form of torture in the mortal world where someone was ripped into pieces by 5 horses. However, the 5 horses were now replaced by dozens of Rakshasas. The strength of a single Rakshasa was not comparable to Suzimo. However, there were dozens of Rakshasas exerting strength at the same time. Even nascent souls that specialized in body tempering would be torn apart, let alone Suzimo. Suzimo opened his mouth and started breathing. A terrifying air current surged through his throat and released a sharp wind howl, as though an ancient divine deity was tugging at a gigantic wind box. "Break it!" Suzimo bellowed loudly. His bones and tendons sounded while his flesh expanded along with the bellow. Right in front of everyone, Suzimo's body, which was initially only 7 foot tall, expanded instantly. In the blink of an eye, he grew to a height of 100 feet and resembled an ancient fiend celestial with a torrential ferocity. Bang, bang, bang. The chains that bound Suzimo's body snapped under the immense burst power. The god race leader's heart skipped a beat and his expression turned grim. The Rakshasa leader's pupils constricted violently. The many cultivators present gasped as they looked up and gazed at the fiend celestial demon king that had just appeared with agape mouths and horrified expressions. What sort of a body was one that was 100 feet tall? Among the cultivators present, the tallest of them were only at the height of Suzimo's toes. Green veins bulged densely on that frighteningly massive body, resembling countless pythons that slithered on its surface. When he broke free from the shackles of the chains, Suzimo was also injured from head to toe due to the spikes. Although he was drenched in blood, he seemed indifferent to it and fighting spirit blazed in his eyes. He was murderous, resembling a human weapon that was soaked in fresh blood. Bang, boom, boom. The sound of thunder rumbling boomed loudly up in the skies. It was as though the awakening of this ancient fiend celestial had shocked the heavens. Lightning flashed and thunder crackled above Suzimo's head, creating electric arcs that split the heavens. A large sea of lightning gathered with a rampant might, as though an apocalypse had arrived. Against that terrifying sight, even the Rakshasa and god race leaders looked somewhat grim and their hearts skipped a beat. This was the true might of heaven and earth. Although their bloodlines were strong, their backgrounds were noble and they inherited many secret skills, they had not cultivated to the point where they could challenge heaven and earth. Yet at that moment Suzimo's head touched the heavens while his feet touched the earth. His eyes were bright as his black hair danced. There was no hint of fear on his expression. It was as though he was a divine being that ruled over the world. Snap. There was a deafening sound. An incomparably thick thunderbolt descended and struck Suzimo. Crackle. Lightning flashed and spread out in electric arcs. However, Suzimo's aura merely turned increasingly terrifying under the baptism of the frightening thunder. Even thunder could not suppress him. The Purple Thunder Manual. This must be the Purple Thunder Manual. A figure was sprawled at the front of the city among the corpses, hiding his traces warily. When he saw that, he was shocked and could not help but exclaim. However, that person reacted swiftly and shut his mouth hurriedly to avoid attracting any attention from the factions in the city. In truth, everyone in Myriad Phenomenon City were totally drawn to the massive figure that was covered in electricity and demonic chi. There was nobody that would bother to look at the front of the city. Ah! Suzimo roared and his bloodshot, demonic eyes widened. He spread his arms and covered the skies, scooping through the air with his massive palms. Clang, clang. More than 10 snap chains were collected by Suzimo's hands. On the other end of the chains were Rakshasas that maintained their grip, unable to let go in time. The surging power of thunder traveled along the chains and burst into the bodies of those Rakshasas. Suzimo's flesh and body could withstand the baptism of thunder, but those Rakshasas couldn't. The Rakshasas in midair shuddered and their eyes blanked out as they convulsed uncontrollably. Before they could snap back to their senses, the Rakshasas were no longer in control of their bodies and fell violently, pulled by a tremendous force. Suzimo had swung his arms to smash the chains down fiercely. More than 10 Rakshasas that shone with lightning were smashed onto the stone slabs. Their tendons and bones snapped while their organs were ruptured. Instantly, their consciousnesses disappeared and their lives were severed. That power was way too strong. Coupled with the burst of the power of thunder, the Rakshasas all died on the spot. All of you die. Suzimo was heated up from the kills and conveniently used the chains as his weapons. His arms danced and thick chains that were filled with lightning tore through the air. The remaining Rakshasas were in chaos as they turned into dark streaks of light that circled around the air. A single chain might have difficulty swatting any of the streaking Rakshasas. However, Su Zimo wielded more than 10 chains and they covered almost everything in their path unavoidably. The chains had formed a web made of lightning. Its area was a forbidden place for the Rakshasas. The chains not only possessed the power of thunder, but also the terrifying burst power of Su Zimo's demon form. They would definitely die if they were struck by the chains. The remaining Rakshasas scattered far away. In fact, they did not even dare to approach him. The mocking, teasing and condescending looks in their eyes had long vanished. Instead, their eyes were now replaced with shock and fear. On the battlefield, the chains smashed onto the ground loudly. However, it was dead silent behind Su Zimo. More than 50,000 cultivators reared their heads with agape mouths, as though they had forgotten how to breathe. Their minds were blank and their eyes reflected nothing but that massive, invincible figure. What happened was way too shocking. In Myriad Phenomenon City, every single step taken by this figure shrouded in scarlet demonic chi caused the mountains to quake and every single roar caused the weather to change. He hurled lightning chains with both arms that ripped through the voids. His chi devoured mountains and rivers while his skill alarmed heaven and earth. Nobody was his match in the world. Chapter 772, The Emperors Are Not Here But I Am. Chapter 772, The Emperors Are Not Here But I Am. On the other side of the battlefield, faced with the same heavenly encompassing formation, compared to Su Zimo's unstoppable toughness and torrential ferocity, Night Spirit's method of dealing with it was much more beguiling and impossible to defend against. More than 30 Rakshasas wielded mystic metal iron chains but they could not trap Night Spirit at all. Night Spirit's speed was faster and his movement technique was even swifter. Even as he dodged the attacks of the Rakshasas, he identified fleeting openings and retaliated fiercely. Night Spirit was like a god of killing. He was born to kill. Every single attack from him was a killing move that was incomparably vicious. There was no Rakshasa that was struck by him that could escape. All of them died with none spared. When the massive battle broke out, many cultivators were drawn to the terrifying might released by Su Zimo's gigantic body in his demon form. By the time everyone realized what was happening and looked to the other side of the battlefield, they discovered to their shock that out of more than 30 Rakshasas that were attacking Night Spirit at the start, only 16 remained. Night Spirit's slaughter did not have a striking visual impact. However, it was filled with impossible imagination and was unfathomable, like a fairy tale. The Rakshasa leader had barely snapped out of his stupor when more than half of his 100-odd clansmen were either dead or injured. "Lowlife, I'm going to tear you guys apart," he shrieked with a furious gaze. The god race leader had a bright gaze and the blood chi in his body surged, emanating a golden glow. Slowly, his body rose and he said in a deep voice, "Prepare to attack with all your strength. We must not let these two survive." Initially he merely intended to watch by the sidelines. But now even he felt threatened. It was clear that the young man in black clothes was not human. However, he merely revealed semblances of his claws occasionally and did not revert to his true form, so his background could not be seen. Even so, he had already dealt frightening damage to the Rakshasa race. The 100-foot-tall existence with torrential demonic chi that resembled an ancient supreme demon king was even scarier. Humans and demons were starkly different in their body structures, bloodline and temperaments etc. However, this human managed to cultivate an inner core that could only be cultivated by demons. Furthermore, he was able to cultivate his inner core to such an extent. The demonic chi he produced was even purer than anything the god race leader had ever seen. The two of them had to be killed. A dark streak of light tore through the air. It possessed a frightening speed and almost vanished entirely, concealed within the lightning web Su Zimo released. Even the three nascent souls could not detect the dark streak of light with their spirit consciousnesses, let alone Su Zimo. It was too fast. That was the speed of the Rakshasa leader. Without that level of speed backing him up, he would not have been able to murder top-tier nascent souls of various super sects that were a major cultivation realm above him. Although the lightning web formed by more than 10 chains that Su Zimo waved around was dense, they could not stop the Rakshasa leader in his tracks. A blood light appeared on Su Zimo's body as a torrential rain of blood poured down. Although he possessed spirit perception which warned him, his body had expanded 100 feet after he took on his demon form. While his strength exploded, his massive body turned him into a larger target with slower movement as well. It was impossible for him to avoid the attack of the Rakshasa leader entirely. Another massive wound appeared across Su Zimo's chest with flesh overturned. Blood soaked everywhere in a frightening sight. It was lucky that he had dodged preemptively, or that slash might have cut him into two. Bang! Bang! More than 10 chains tore through the air and smashed down. 2 gigantic pits appeared on the ground. It was a step too late. The Rakshasa leader's figure had already vanished from the spot far away from Su Zimo's attack radius. He had a cold gaze and was prepared to attack again at any time. Lowlife, you're way too weak compared to me. The Rakshasa leader gave an eerie smile. I'm going to wear you down and torment you bit by bit. You can't even touch the hem of my clothes. Su Zimo's blood chi surged and the blood flow around his wounds slowed gradually. His body's regeneration capabilities were way too strong. Although the Rakshasa race's curved saber had the effect of tearing wounds to cause unstoppable blood flow, Su Zimo's regeneration capabilities negated the negative effect. Even so, Su Zimo was not entirely confident. He knew that the true test had just begun. It was difficult for him to defend against the speed of the Rakshasa leader. The only thing he could rely on was his unfathomable spirit perception. At the same time, Su Zimo wanted to remove his demon form. He would stand a chance to fight by trading away some strength for agility and speed. On the other end, the God Race leader had already targeted him. That was not all. The God Race leader even instructed 5 other God Race beings to surround Su Zimo, leaving only one God Race being to keep watch over Nian Qi. The God Race had no intention of giving Su Zimo any breathing space. The God Race leader had no intention to take on a fair fight either. It was clear that he wanted to use his full strength to murder Su Zimo. If Su Zimo were to dispel his demon form, his strength would be diminished and he would be disadvantaged against the God Race. He was in a predicament. As Su Zimo hesitated, the Rakshasa leader scoffed coldly. It was clear that he recognized the circumstances as well. Swash! A dark light flashed once again. Su Zimo had a great shock. If he were to dispel his demon form at that moment, he might be able to avoid the attack of the Rakshasa leader, but he would definitely receive a devastating blow from the God Race. All of a sudden, a black figure flashed like a phantom. Clang! A fearsome claw appeared in the void and held back the dark light. The dark light dissipated. The Rakshasa leader revealed himself and retreated swiftly, looking somewhat wretched. 5 scratches appeared across the robes in front of his chest. If he was a step slower earlier on, his heart would have been gouged out. Unknowingly, Night Spirit broke free of the entanglement from more than 10 Rakshasas and burst over at lightning speed to deflect the Rakshasa leader. First, leave the Rakshasa race to me. Deal with the God Race. Night Spirit said slowly, be careful, the God Race has a terrifying bloodline and boundless strength. They specialize in melee combat and the power of the secret skills and spirit arts they inherited is shockingly strong. Su Zimo was instantly pumped with Night Spirit's help. All right. He declared loudly, today the 2 of us brothers will take on those of the primordial 9 races. Let's see what's so noble about your bloodline. Back in the ancient era, experts of the human race were able to defeat the primordial 9 races and oust you guys to a corner in Tianhuang mainland. Today I will do the same and suppress you lot. This affair was the shame of the primordial 9 races and the Rakshasa and God race were extremely irked from his words. The God race leader's eyes flashed with a momentary gloom. Foo-foo. Immediately after, he laughed coldly and said in a mocking tone, in the ancient era, the human race was full of experts and multiple emperors rose. How dare a puny golden core compare yourself to the ancient experts? You're nothing compared to them. The age of the human race is long gone. All those ancient emperors have either died or left. None of them remain on Tianhuang mainland. The God race leader pointed with an overwhelming aura as he declared with pride and confidence, this world shall welcome a brand new age and new overlords. The human race shall once again return to the bottom of the 10,000 races and be enslaved by everyone. Ha 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 ha. Su Zimo burst into laughter and charged towards the God race leader in huge strides. Each time his massive feet landed on the ground, myriad phenomenon city shook and dust and gravel billowed. The ancient emperors are not here, but I am. Su Zimo's voice contained a dominance that looked down upon the world and everything else as he yelled, in this ancient battlefield, I'm the emperor. Chapter 773 Bloodline Phenomenon. Chapter 773, Bloodline Phenomenon. The emperors are not here, but I am. In this ancient battlefield, I'm the emperor. Those sentences reverberated throughout Myriad Phenomenon City for a long time. The bloods of the cultivators present were ignited. His vigor is torrential. Perfected Lord Luo Shui could not help but praise. Anyone else wouldn't even dare to dream of saying something as such. There's no wonder why he's the number one of the phenomenon ranking and the strongest monster incarnate in history. Perfected Lord Yu Jun could not conceal the admiration in his eyes either. His bearings and boldness are truly inspiring. This lad has a limitless future. Everything depends on the outcome of this battle. Monk Yin Lu said softly with a worried expression. This lad was already exhausted when he arrived here. Now that he's engaging the Rakshasa and God race in a fierce battle, he must be in an even worse state. If he fails to avoid this calamity... Monk Yin Lu did not continue. There was naturally no future to speak of if he couldn't avoid this calamity. As everyone discussed, apart from the God race leader, the other 5 God race beings struck. Boom, 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 boom. 5 explosions sounded in succession. The 5 God race beings vanished. Mysterious pyramid structures appeared slowly over where they stood initially. They were golden in color with a squarish bottom and triangular faces. Each golden pyramid resembled a gigantic gold word character. It hovered in midair and let out golden lights with rampant mites. There were countless living beings that prostrated at the bottom of the pyramid. There were at least hundreds of millions of them and there was no end in sight. Every single living being knelt on the ground with their palms clasped together. They looked up at the mysterious pyramid above their heads and recited prayers. Golden threads extended from the heads of the living beings and converged at the peak of the pyramid. A person stood at the peak of each pyramid. It was the God race beings who had vanished earlier. Their arms were eagle-spread, as though they were absorbing some sort of power from the endless living beings at the bottom using the pyramid as a medium. Their auras climbed endlessly. 5 mysterious pyramids descended in the voids and emitted a boundless might. The 50,000 cultivators at the bottom were shocked. Against the 5 pyramids, many cultivators sensed uncontrollable dread and pressure that stemmed from the depths of their souls. Many cultivators knelt onto the ground in a thud, drenched in sweat and shivering. For them, it was as though they had returned to the primordial era. They were personally witnessing the grand era where the 10,000 races paid respect to the God race as a whole. All the races and living beings were subjugated under the rule of the God race. Humans were not spared. This was a suppression that originated from an ancient memory. Even perfected Lord Yu Jun and the other 2 felt shudders, let alone the golden cores present. Bow down or die. The 5 God race beings spoke in unison coldly without any emotions at all. It was as though that was a final warning. Any bit of hesitance would bring about doom. Thud, thud. More and more cultivators knelt on the ground and remained silent in fear. If that was the case for the cultivators that were not directly involved, it was impossible to imagine the pressure exerted on Su Zimo, who was standing in the middle of 5 mysterious pyramids. Bloody wounds appeared one after another on the surface of his massive body. Su Zimo's body was already on the verge of exploding before the 5 pyramids even began their attacks. Golden core phenomenon. A look of surprise flashed through Su Zimo's eyes. Humph. The God race leader did not make a move still. He merely stood proudly with his hands behind his back. This is not the same golden core phenomenon that you ants are referring to. This is a bloodline phenomenon, a legacy of our God race. Su Zimo's eyes shimmered at the mention of bloodline phenomenon, as though something crossed his mind. The God race leader continued, as long as you possess the bloodline of the God race, you will definitely be able to cultivate this phenomenon at a certain age without the need to learn it. Powerful. That was the terror of the God race. One could wield the power of a phenomenon just by growing up without the need for cultivation. The purer the bloodline, the stronger the power of the bloodline phenomenon. The bloodline phenomenon of the 5 God race beings could suppress most of the golden core phenomenons on the phenomenon ranking. Apart from Su Zimo and Nian, there was probably nobody else who could take on the bloodline phenomenon of the God race. It's over. Perfected Lord Yu Jun's expression darkened as he shook his head. Su Zimo's spirit energy is depleted and he can't release his golden core phenomenons. There's no way he can stop the attacks of the 5 god race beings. To think that the god race wouldn't give him a chance at all and release their bloodline phenomenons instantly. Monkey Lu sighed as well. Wrong? Perfected Lord Luo Shui furrowed her brows slightly. She gazed at Su Zimo's face and whispered, "There's no hint of panic in his eyes. It's as though he still has a trump card." How is that possible? Perfected Lord Yujun and Monk Yin Lu shook their heads at the same time. Even if Su Zimo had another trump card, he could not defend against the attacks of the god race's bloodline phenomenon without his golden core phenomenon. Furthermore, there were 5 bloodline phenomenons in total. Bow down or die. The 5 god race beings bellowed coldly without any emotions. You think that the few of you are enough to make me bow down? Su Zimo reared his head in wild laughter. Scarlet demonic chi rumbled around him the moment he finished speaking. One after another, lifelike, menacing demons with sharp gazes were conjured swiftly. There was a desolate bull that plowed the heavens. A mighty and towering rock bear. A swiveling anaconda. A wild sanguine ape. A rampant divine steed. A cruel hell's tiger. A wind leopard that traversed the winds. Every single demon was incomparably massive. Some of them were more than 100 feet tall while some of them were dozens of feet long. All of them had bloodshot eyes and murderous intents. Su Zimo was surrounded by the 7 ancient demon kings and his aura rose rapidly. He was even suppressing the 5 god race beings gradually. He opened his mouth. The 7 ancient demon kings opened their mouths almost at the same time. Roar. Su Zimo let out a deafening roar the same time as the 7 ancient demon kings. Some of the cultivators fainted in shock when they heard the roars. Bloodline phenomenon. The god race leader's expression changed and he exclaimed, "Bingo!" The doubts in Su Zimo's hearts were fully answered when he heard the god race leader's statement. The 7 ancient demon kings were a product of his cultivation of the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. They possessed terrifying strength and helped Su Zimo take down powerful foes such as Wuxia prior to this. It was only at this moment that Su Zimo realized, the 7 ancient demon kings were his bloodline phenomenon. In truth, the 7 ancient demon kings had already appeared when he was creating his inner core. However, he did not realize that those phantoms had anything to do with the phenomenon. How is that possible? The god race leader looked at everything in disbelief and grit his teeth. The bloodline of the human race is cheap and lowly. How are you able to cultivate such a phenomenon? Even among the primordial 9 races, not every single race could possess bloodline phenomenons. The Rakshasa race did not have any. A bloodline phenomenon was extremely precious. As one's cultivation grew and their bloodline became stronger, the power of their bloodline phenomenon would increase as well. Its growth potential was limitless. What sort of a nonsensical god's jurisdiction is that? Break it. Su Zimo pointed forward. The 7 ancient demon kings around him charged forward impatiently with a ferocious aura. Chapter 774 Reappearance of the Butterfly Phantom. Chapter 774 Reappearance of the Butterfly Phantom. Normally, even bloodline phenomenons could not challenge a god's jurisdiction. However, the expressions of the god race beings present changed when the 7 demons appeared around Su Zimo. They sensed pressure from the 7 demons. They even had an urge to bow down in their hearts. How could this be? A look of disbelief appeared on the handsome face of a god race being as he murmured softly, "It's merely a lowlife with a cheap bloodline. How am I experiencing such a sensation?" There was no way the god race being could know that the 7 demons were conjured from Su Zimo's cultivation of the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. Every single one of those 7 demons were once notorious demon kings of the great wilderness. All of them were Dai Yu's most important helpers that fought together with her. Although they were merely phantoms, there was no way they would fear the god race. 5 demons charged towards 5 god race beings. On the other hand, the Hell Tiger and Wind Leopard demon kings charged towards the god race leader who was not far away. Su Zimo had released his bloodline phenomenon against the encirclement of the god race and launched a full-blown counterattack. The wild bovine demon king ran straight ahead and dust billowed in the wake of its muscular body. It panted with a lowered head as it smashed its gigantic horns into the pyramid. Boom. A deafening noise echoed. Cracks appeared one after another on the surface of the pyramid, expanding swiftly to spread through the entire pyramid. the phantom of the wild bovine demon king dimmed considerably as well. Once again, the wild bovine demon king lowered its head and thrust forward. Boom. The pyramid collapsed violently. On the vast land, the many living beings that were praying to the god's jurisdiction dissipated into thin air as well. The blow from that mighty smash caused the figure of the wild bovine demon king to dissipate too. Boom, 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 boom. Almost at the same time, the rock bear demon king's gargantuan body leaned onto a pyramid. The anaconda demon king coiled around a pyramid and hissed into the skies. As though it wanted to devour the blazing sun, its dozens of feet-long body constricted continuously and exerted pressure on the pyramid. The eyes of the sanguine ape flashed scarlet as it swung both arms like stone hammers to launch a flurry of punches on a pyramid. The divine steed demon king's hooves rumbled like thunder and it transformed into a white streak of light. Instantly, a powerful burst almost punctured a pyramid. Right in front of everyone, the 5 pyramids swayed continuously until they were completely collapsed. The crowd was shocked. Su Zimo's bloodline phenomenon was so frightening that he could take on 5 enemies single-handedly without being disadvantaged. The remaining 2 demon kings charged towards the god race leader. Initially, the god race leader's hands were behind his back. But now he had to free them. His blood chi surged with a golden glow and he seemed like an unparalleled divine being. The god race leader did not back off or retreat against the rampaging auras of the 2 overwhelming ancient demons. Instead he strode right ahead. He raised his hand and swung his fist. It was a simple move. However, it was earth-shaking. Many cultivators gasped. He was trying to contend against the power of phenomenon using his bloodline and body strength. How confident was he to be able to do that? Bang, bang. There were 2 resounding bangs. The remaining 2 demons were shattered by 2 punches from the god race leader and dissipated completely. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. Even if he was in his peak condition, he was not entirely confident of securing victory against the god race leader. Too weak. The god race leader flicked up a strand of loose golden hair on his forehead with a finger and said indifferently with a cold expression, "You might have been able to threaten me if I allowed you to continue cultivating further. Unfortunately, you won't get that chance." The moment he said that, the god race leader's figure vanished. A pyramid appeared where he originally stood. It became increasingly clearer as it reached a height of a few thousand feet. It was majestic and bedazzling with blinding golden rays. This pyramid was way too huge. The pyramids created by the other god race beings were not even 10% of this pyramid. Even Su Zimo's body that was 100 feet tall seemed short in the face of the pyramid. Many small pyramids floated around the gigantic pyramid and god race beings stood on top of each of them. Beneath the group of pyramids were countless living beings that prostrated and recited prayers day and night. This was a true god's jurisdiction. The god race leader stood on top of the middle pyramid like a divine being. He looked down upon the masses and Su Zimo, sneering coldly, "That's all you amount to, but you have not seen what I'm capable of yet. A lion gives his all even when he's fighting a rabbit. I'm not going to give you any chances." When the god race leader finished his words, the majestic and grand group of pyramids beneath him shifted towards Su Zimo's direction and crushed down slowly. A massive shadow shrouded over with a boundless might. Many cultivators broke down mentally under the shadow. Everyone felt despair. It was as though the firmaments were falling to bury everyone, but they could not do anything at all. Heis. Monk Yin Lu sighed in pity. If that lad's spirit energy was refilled and he could release the black tortoise golden lotus phenomenon, he might have been able to fight with this god's jurisdiction. Unfortunately. Perfected Lord Yujun shook his head as well. Perhaps a miracle might happen. Perfected Lord Luo Shui murmured softly, as though she was asking a question while consoling herself and everyone else at the same time. On the battlefield. Su Zimo's gaze was cold as he looked up into the skies at the group of pyramids above his head. His eyes were deep as the ocean without any emotions in them. However, despite the pressure of the god's jurisdiction, his aura was rising rapidly as well. All of a sudden, a demon beast gradually appeared in the surging demonic chi behind him. It spread its blood-colored wings that had 2 bright moons etched on them, resembling a pair of eyes. It was a gigantic blood-colored butterfly. It was not exactly humongous and was only around 10 feet in size. Compared to the pyramid that was a few thousand feet tall, it was as insignificant as an ant. However, that blood-colored butterfly caused myriad phenomenon city to go silent. Everything went silent. An unprecedented, frightening aura began to emanate. Everyone shuddered. Even the fight between Night Spirit and the Rakshasa race paused briefly. The Rakshasa leader looked at the blood-colored butterfly and felt his scalp prickle. He broke out in cold sweat and his bloodline was frozen as he nearly fell from midair. Night Spirit did not manage to seize that opening. That was because he had glanced over as well. He did not feel fear even when he faced the Rakshasa and God race. However, a single look at the blood-colored butterfly caused his pupils to constrict with a hint of fear. What is that? Perfected Lord Yujun grit his teeth and his voice trembled. Suddenly, the wings of the blood-colored butterfly flapped gently all of a sudden. It was a faint motion that was almost undetectable. However, that single vibration of the wings created a terrifying cyclone. The voids above Su Zimo's head contorted and shifted. It was collapsing and disintegrating. The smaller pyramids around the god race leader shook as dust and sand fell endlessly. Cracks were appearing on the pyramids. Only the pyramid that the god race leader sat on remained standing. Bang! Boom! Boom! Countless small pyramids toppled and turned into dust clouds. The massive, encompassing god's jurisdiction was about to be destroyed completely by a seemingly insignificant butterfly. Chapter 775, Mystic Magnet Mountain. Chapter 775, Mystic Magnet Mountain. The blood-colored butterfly was Dai Yu's phantom. In the battle at the Great Shen Ruins previously, the appearance of this blood butterfly phantom was also the reason why Su Zimo was able to kill the number one perfected being of the North region, Shi Wuya domineeringly and rise to fame. Initially, Su Zimo had no idea why the blood butterfly phantom would appear. It was only earlier on that he finally realized, the blood butterfly phantom should be the ultimate phenomenon of his bloodline. Right now, half of the blood butterfly was illusory and incorporeal. Su Zimo had a hunch that the blood butterfly would only truly materialize and release its true strength after he had cultivated to the final step of the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness and conjured all 12 demon kings. From high and above, the god race leader looked down at the blood butterfly behind Su Zimo with a shocked expression. He could smell the scent of death with the arrival of the blood butterfly. The blood butterfly merely flapped its wings gently and all the small pyramids in the god's jurisdiction crumbled completely. If the blood butterfly continued to spread its wings, even the pyramid he sat on would not be able to hold for much longer. Let's see if your blood butterfly can defeat my god's jurisdiction. The god race leader hollered and controlled the god's jurisdiction to descend heavily with a single thought in Su Zimo's direction. The blood butterfly behind Su Zimo spread its wings and flew forward. The scene resembled an ant trying to shake a tree, a praying mantis trying to stop a carriage. However, as the two of them collided in midair, an incomparably shocking aura swept through the 9 heavens and the entire world. Space and time seemed to be frozen. The next moment, a blinding light burst forth. The power released by the collision of the two bloodline phenomenons was way too terrifying. Against the impact of that power, the god race leader fell from midair, unable to control himself. Su Zimo could not stand firm either as his massive body was repelled, smashing into the ground with a billowing dust cloud. The god race leader stood up from the dust with a grim expression. His initially handsome face looked wretched and his clean robes were covered in dust. On the surface, it seemed like both of them were evenly matched. However, the god race leader knew in his heart that if Su Zimo was in peak condition, he would have been disadvantaged for this exchange in their fight. However, that was merely an if. Right now he had 5 clansmen around him. Furthermore, Su Zimo was not in peak condition. He took a huge toll during that clash. However, the toll on Su Zimo was even more immense. Slowly, Su Zimo walked out from the ravine in the dust clouds. His frighteningly massive body with a torrential aura had vanished. Su Zimo had reverted to his original form. He looked plain and scholarly. His bare upper body was filled with wounds, most of them created when he broke free of the spiked chains from the Rakshasa race earlier on. His black hair scattered down over his face and his expression was pale. It was as the god race leader had predicted, Su Zimo's stamina was almost spent. Su Zimo fought consecutively after his fight with Nian and he had not had any rest. If not for his frightening physique due to his cultivation of the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness, he would have fallen a long time ago. Patron Su, hurry and escape while you still have the strength. Given your capabilities, even the God race leader won't be able to stop you. Monk Yin Lu could see that Su Zimo was exhausted as well and sent a voice transmission. In truth, nobody had expected the fight to reach this stage. Everyone could tell that Su Zimo had already given it his all. However, the circumstances were immensely dire and wasn't something that he could salvage alone. Su Zimo remained silent when he heard Monk Yin Lu's advice and merely shook his head. He could not leave. Xiaoning, Monkey Little Fatty were here. His kin, siblings and friends were here. If he left, none of them would be spared. He would not leave even if he had to die fighting in Myriad Phenomenon City. Monk Yin Lu sighed internally when he sensed Su Zimo's determination and conviction and did not offer further advice. Fu. The God race leader laughed. Your inner core isn't able to sustain your previous body anymore. How long more can you hold out for? Long enough to kill you. Su Zimo smiled faintly, but his tone was murderous. Foolish dreams. The God race leader retracted his smile and sneered, let's see what else you have left. Kill? The moment his voice sounded, the God race leader and the 5 clansmen split into different directions and attacked Su Zimo at the same time. Good timing. Su Zimo was unfazed and whipped out a blood-colored saber, yelling, I'll let my blood quencher have a taste of the God race's blood. The 5 God race beings were barehanded, but their speed did not slow down. On the contrary, a look of ridicule flashed through the depths of the eyes of the 5 God race beings. Su Zimo's heart sank and he felt uneasy. All of a sudden, the God race leader swiped his storage bag and withdrew a grayish-black mountain. Although it was only the size of a palm, it gave off a mysterious aura. Before Su Zimo's saber technique was released, Blood Quencher burst towards the mountain uncontrollably. Even with his strength, Su Zimo had difficulty holding Blood Quencher back. Not only that, Blood Quencher even dragged him off the ground into the air towards the grayish-black mountain in the God race leader's palm. What's going on? Su Zimo was alarmed. Why would Blood Quencher break free from his control and fly towards the grayish-black mountain uncontrollably? At that moment, Su Zimo had already lost his balance. If he allowed Blood Quencher to pull him along, he would be killed by the 5 God race beings before he even arrived before the God race leader. Without hesitation, Su Zimo let go of his grip instantly. Even then he felt a powerful suction force. It came from his left hand. The glove. A thought crossed Su Zimo's mind. He wore a Khanate spirit glove on his left hand that he had obtained after killing a Glass Palace Paragon. Although he did not know the reason why, that was the only possibility. The 5 God race beings had closed into him. In a flash, Su Zimo removed his glove and allowed it to fly away. Suddenly, cracking sounds echoed from within his body. His body that was initially 7 foot long shrank into a meatball in the blink of an eye. Bang, bang, bang. The 5 God race beings punched into air. Even so, Su Zimo could feel a powerful energy fluctuation circling around his body and his organs were shaken considerably. That was close. If he had reacted slightly slower, he might have been torn apart by the 5 God race beings and died on the spot. Mr. Watch out. Suddenly Nian yelled, the mountain is an ancient treasure, the Mystic Magnet Mountain, and it possesses magnetic properties. Any weapon made of metal would be sucked to it. No wonder. Su Zimo's eyes flashed and he was enlightened. Ah, the Mystic Magnet Mountain. Perfected Lord Yujun's expression changed and he exclaimed. The Mystic Magnet Mountain was famous. Some treasures were not spirit or dermic weapons, but they possessed extraordinary and special capabilities. If used appropriately, their true potential could even surpass Dharma treasures. Those treasures were known as unique treasures. The Mystic Magnet Mountain one was of the 7 great unique treasures. Chapter 776, Opportunity. Chapter 776, Opportunity. Oh no. Perfected Lord Luo Shui had a grim expression. The Mystic Magnet Mountain is one of the 7 great ancient unique treasures. Even if the God race leader is not able to unleash its full strength, it's more than enough to suppress everything. More than half of the 7 ancient unique treasures were lost in the ancient war. How did it end up in the hands of the God race leader? Perfected Lord Yujun frowned. At that moment, on another side of the battlefield, The Rakshasa leader who was fighting against Night Spirit noticed the commotion on this side as well. He smiled coldly and said in an odd manner, "Seems like the god race has indeed beaten us to it. It's just luck." The god race leader chuckled smugly. He shook his palm and blood quencher and the glove that was sucked onto it fell off. "Good saber." The god race leader raised blood quencher and examined it on purpose in front of Su Zimo before putting it away into his storage bag. "I've got it." Right then, perfected Lord Yujun said deeply, "The mystic magnet mountain is probably the true motive why the Rakshasa and god race entered the ancient battlefield." "That's right." The god race leader did not bother to hide when he heard perfected Lord Yujun's words. "We obtained clues to the mystic magnet mountain and entered the ancient battlefield for this unique treasure. However, we also heard that the human paragons are gathered in Myriad Phenomenon City, so we dropped by out of convenience. Indeed, it is as we expected. You're all nothing but a bunch of worthless scums." Although many paragons were furious, they could not refute him. Su Zimo remained silent and merely glared at the mystic magnet mountain in the palm of the god race leader, trying to think up a solution. His disadvantage was even greater after that unique treasure was brought out. Notwithstanding the fact that 2 of his Khanate spirit weapons were confiscated, even weapons such as his Illumination sword formation and coiling dragon seal could not be used. The only thing he could use was the Great Chen Imperial Seal that he had just obtained from Dian. However, the Great Chen Imperial Seal was a Khanate spirit weapon and would most probably not be able to go against the Mystic Magnet Mountain. The situation was turning extremely dire. Swash! The god race leader did not give Su Zimo any breathing space. In a flash, he closed in swiftly and his blood chi surged, as though a golden ocean with a fearsome aura was created around him. The 5 god race beings in the vicinity struck at the same time. The coordination between the 6 of them was flawless and perfect. The 6 god race beings had waited for a long time and were thoroughly invigorated. However, Su Zimo had been in successive fights and was completely exhausted. Furthermore, 2 of his Khanate spirit weapons were taken away and he was now fighting bare-handed. It was obvious who would win. Even so, many cultivators watched the battlefield intently with a hint of hope deep in their eyes. Nobody dared blink as they watched with bated breaths. A single second was the difference between life and death in a melee combat fight. When the 6 god race beings closed in, Su Zimo displayed his formidable melee combat prowess in a flash. He judged and controlled the situation with precision. Su Zimo's expression was cold as he bolted in retreat, leaning back against a god race being behind him like a clumsy rock bear. Bang! A dull sound of defeat echoed from their collision. Although Su Zimo smashed against the god race being's fist with his back, the god race being's expression changed, he gave a dull thud and staggered in retreat. That was a killing move from the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. If it was any other race or cultivator, that single move would have snapped their tendons and bones, killing them. With the retreat of the god race being him, Su Zimo's initially cramped maneuvering room became much more spacious. He continued to burst backwards with the momentum and avoided 2 god race beings that lunged from the side. With a sudden spin, his speed exploded once more as he bolted towards the retreating god race being with a ferocious gaze. "Kill?" Su Zimo shouted like the explosion of a deafening thunderbolt. The god race being was alarmed and shuddered. That momentary pause was all it took for Su Zimo to close in. He reached out with both hands and gripped the god race being's shoulders before raising his knee to ram forward. From the point of view of many cultivators, Su Zimo seemed to have vanished from sight. What replaced him was an incomparably divine steed. That single smash released a tragic aura. Snap! The chest of the god race being caved in with a huge dent. His snapped bones stabbed into his lungs and organs. That single attack was enough to kill him. However, the bloodline of the god race was strong and their life force was rich. Even with that blow, the god race being did not die on the spot. He coughed with golden blood in his mouth while he tried to retaliate and kill Su Zimo. There was no way Su Zimo would accord him that chance. As he rammed with his knee, his arms exerted strength on the god race being's shoulders and he yanked to both sides. Shing! The arms of the god race being were ripped off by Su Zimo. Fresh blood that shone with a faint golden glow splashed onto the ground. The god race being fell far away and his gaze dimmed. Gradually his breathing stopped. The crowd burst into an uproar upon the sight of that. This was the number 1 of the phenomenon ranking. Even against the encirclement of 6 god race beings, he was so overwhelming and killed one of them instead. Lowlife, you deserve to die. The other god race beings roared and closed in as well. The god race leader twisted his palm and gripped the ancient unique treasure, the mystic magnet mountain, to smash down viciously onto Su Zimo's head. He was ruthless. I've got to get rid of the mystic magnet mountain first. A thought crossed Su Zimo's mind. There was something in his possession that, although metallic, had a mysterious origin and might be able to take on the mystic magnet mountain. With that thought, Su Zimo no longer hesitated and slapped his storage bag to withdraw a gigantic bronze square tripod. The bronze square tripod was filled with rust and cracks, looking as though it could crack at any moment. However, it gave off an antiquated aura. The aura seemed to date even further back than the ancient phenomenon steel. Su Zimo swung the bronze square tripod and smashed it violently towards the mystic magnet mountain. Clang! The mystic magnet mountain and bronze square tripod collided. A screeching sound of metal clashing echoed and almost pierced everyone's eardrums. Many cultivators that were watching squatted down and clutched their ears with pained expressions. The 2 people in the center of the battlefield even shuddered. Both their palms were split apart by the tremendous recoil and their flesh exploded, rendering them incapable of gripping their weapons. Both the mystic magnet mountain and bronze square tripod were sent flying. Su Zimo smashed heavily onto the ground. The god race leader rolled a few times in midair before falling as well. The remaining 4 god race beings had just charged forward when they were sent flying from the shock wave released from the clash of the 2 weapons. Their faces turned pale and their minds buzzed, causing them momentary deafness. Su Zimo slammed onto the ground in pain all over and almost fainted over. However, he struggled and stood up at the first moment. Within the dust, his eyes shone coldly as he glared at the god race leader not far away with a murderous intent. An opportunity. This was the only opportunity for him to kill the god race leader. If he could kill the god race leader before the other 4 god race beings regrouped, there might be a chance to turn the tides. Chapter 777 Futile Efforts. Chapter 777 Futile Efforts. On the ground, a slender, long figure slithered towards the god race leader, creating dust clouds in its wake. It was like a swift anaconda that moved extremely fast. The god race leader had just stabilized his body when he felt a suffocating evil aura charge towards him. Kill? A roar exploded in the ears of the god race leader. Thunderclap kill. The divine blood of the god race leader surged and negated the attack of the sound attack almost instantly. He was unaffected. The next moment, as a sandstorm raged, a figure appeared faintly in a hunched manner. The eyes of the figure were deeply murderous as he pushed up towards the god race leader's chin, as though he was offering an immortal fruit. Good timing. The god race leader hollered loudly, "I'll let you have a taste of the strength of the god race." He did not avoid or retreat and took a half step forward as he curled his arm with his elbows down like a gigantic spear. He aimed at Su Zimo's incoming hands and thrust down fiercely. Bang. The flesh and bones collided with a dull, forceful sound. Su Zimo shuddered and grunted deeply. His clasped hands were almost separated from the god race leader's attack. That single exchange made him realize that the god race leader was strong. Extremely strong. Even if he was in peak condition, he might not be able to secure victory in melee combat. The bloodline of the god race was indeed frightening. Right now, Su Zimo was already exhausted and the power of his inner core and blood chi were greatly diminished. He could not withstand the blows from the god race leader. Right then, after the god race leader thrust his elbows down, he took another half step forward and flung his arm fiercely like an iron whip. Swoosh. His arm smashed down towards Su Zimo's head and the wind howled in its wake. The 2 moves were perfectly executed with a fluid motion. Given Su Zimo's condition, there was no way he could defend against the attack. Furthermore, he had already sensed that the 4 god race beings who were scattered not far away were already rushing over. If he were to retreat at this moment, he would lose the opportunity to kill the god race leader completely. Su Zimo's gaze turned cold as he narrowed his eyes. He raised his right hand and gripped his fist to defend against the attack. The divine phoenix bone was in his right hand. No matter how strong the god race leader was, he could not destroy the divine phoenix bone. If he could release the power of the divine phoenix bone, Su Zimo would be able to seize the opportunity to kill the god race leader. If not, the god race leader would definitely take some damage as well. Bang. The two fists collided. The power of the divine phoenix bone was not triggered. Su Zimo gasped and frowned with a pained expression. Although the divine phoenix bone ensured that his palm would definitely be intact, he still endured the terrifying blow in his arm which caused unimaginable pain. While the divine phoenix bone was a mythical object, Su Zimo was not able to wield its power yet, and it did not provide much of a boost to his combat strength. Ah! The god race leader was not in the best state either, as he exclaimed and retracted his arm. His fist was bruised as blood clots converged. Naturally, a small injury as such was nothing for the god race leader. His golden divine blood surged and his arm had already recovered. At that moment, Su Zimo endured the pain and leaped up. He withdrew the Great Chen Imperial Seal from his storage bag with his left hand and smashed it down the head of the god race leader. He gripped his right fist and hurled it down like a gigantic hammer as well. Humph! The god race leader did not retreat still as he extended both arms at lightning speed. His fingers were outstretched and shone with golden glows as a terrifying power surged through them. It was clear that he was releasing a secret skill of the god race. Swoosh! Almost at the same time, the Great Chen Imperial Seal leader's hands gripped the Great Chen Imperial Seal and Su Zimo's fist. Both parties were in a stalemate right in front of one another, contending against the other's strength. You can't win. The eyes of the god race leader flickered with golden spots. Not necessarily. Su Zimo sneered gently, and suddenly, a blinding light burst forth from his right eye. It resembled a blazing sun that illuminated the entire world like daylight. An incomparably dazzling light column shot towards the god race leader's face. Illumination Eye. This was Su Zimo's killing move. Everything he had done earlier was for this burst attack. The two of them were way too close and it was impossible to dodge. Visual technique. It's a visual technique. What a strong visual technique. It might even be comparable to Di Yin's Eclipse Eye. Cries of surprises came from the crowd. In the cultivation world, it was extremely rare to find secret skills for vocal or visual techniques. Even if one possessed the cultivation technique, they might not be able to cultivate it successfully. Throughout history, there had been countless people who blinded themselves while attempting to cultivate visual techniques. Visual techniques were secret skills that could be released instantly and were extremely difficult to defend against. Right now, the god race leader was faced with the attack of a visual technique. The power of the light column could definitely destroy him. He could smell the scent of death that had been waiting for a long time. The god race leader wielded the Great Chen Imperial Seal with his left hand and Su Zimo's fist with his right hand. Given their distance, it was too late if he wanted to release his grips to defend against the power of the visual technique. Su Zimo had calculated everything. There was nobody to save him. Only he could save himself. In a flash, a golden spot of light shone from the depths of the god race leader's eyes, and his eyes turned completely golden. They were cold, merciless, and exuded a boundless might. God's Eye. Accompanied with a holler, the god race leader's eyes shone brightly golden and released two golden rays. The two golden rays converged in midair to form an even thicker golden light column which collided fiercely against the blinding white ray. God's Eye, the visual technique of the god race. It could only be cultivated with the bloodline of the god race. Sizzle. The two light columns collided in midair and paused for a brief moment before letting out a screeching sound. Both powers were eating one another. Immediately after, the blinding white ray intensified and destroyed the golden light in front of it. It shot right into the left eye of the god race leader and vanished. Ah! The god race leader howled miserably. He burst in retreat and clutched his left eye. At the same time, he bit his tongue and spat out a mouthful of essence blood to set up a series of golden light shields in front of his body. Su Zimo was about to charge forward with his advantage, but he was blocked by the golden light shields. Thereafter he was surrounded by golden, surging blood chi that attacked from all directions. The four god race beings had already arrived. What a pity. Su Zimo sighed when he looked at the god race leader who was not far away. In reality, if the god race leader had not cultivated God's Eye, the power of illumination, I would definitely pierce his head and kill him on the spot. However, with the obstruction of the God's Eye's power, that sure kill move ended up merely blinding the God Race leader's left eye. The God Race leader's reaction was even swifter and he was not flustered over the blow. he bolted in retreat instantly while laying down his moves to prevent Su Zimo from chasing him. If that wasn't the case, Su Zimo would have been able to continue his chase and kill the God race leader. He felt helpless, everything was futile. Although the fight merely lasted for a brief moment, it expended Su Zimo's final bit of stamina and mental energy. Right now the 4 God race beings had already encircled him. It was almost impossible for him to attempt to kill the God race leader once more. Or rather, it was already impossible for Su Zimo to even defend himself right now. Chapter 778, Illumination Dragon Eye? Chapter 778, Illumination Dragon Eye? Bang, bang, bang. Su Zimo could no longer defend against the incoming 4 God race beings and could only try his best to avoid taking damage to his vitals. However, he received 3 heavy punches to his chest, abdomen and back. He staggered 3 steps in retreat with a pale expression and his bones felt like they were on the verge of scattering. His blood chi surged and his organs were immensely shaken. Every single breath he took had a strong blood stench. If it was any other cultivator, their bodies would have been split apart by a single punch from a God race being, let alone 3. On the other side, Night Spirit's initially cold expression turned slightly anxious as he looked at everything unfold. Upon closer inspection, it could be seen that in the depths of his eyes, there was a hint of conflict, hesitation and cautiousness still. Night Spirit was still not in his true form. Even so, the number of Rakshasas that died in his hands increased by the moment. Even the Rakshasa leader could not stop Night Spirit's slaughter. As time passed by, the Rakshasa leader became increasingly alarmed. He could vaguely sense that the black-robed man seemed to be repressing something. It was as though there was an even more terrifying and frightening power hidden within the black-robed man's body. The only reason why it wasn't released was due to the black-robed man's considerations. The Rakshasa leader harbored thoughts of retreating. However, Night Spirit was distracted when Su Zimo was in danger and the Rakshasa leader seized the chance to cut a bloody gash on Night Spirit's leg. The wound was so deep that his bone could be seen. If Night Spirit was a tad slower in dodging that attack, his entire leg would have been severed. Blood gushed everywhere. Night Spirit did not say anything but his expression turned frostier. The Rakshasa leader's mind was activated once again upon the sight of Night Spirit's injury. The situation at Su Zimo's side is fixed. Once he's killed, I might be able to kill this mysterious black-robed man with the help of the God race. At that thought, the Rakshasa leader declared, "Everyone, let's persevere for a little more. Once our friends from the God race are here to assist us, this lowlife will definitely die." There were less than 20 Rakshasas remaining. They released a wave of ferocious attacks under the lead of the Rakshasa leader. However, despite his injury, Night Spirit could still render the attacks useless one after another. On the other side, Su Zimo was pushed back by the 4 God race beings. He barely managed to stabilize himself and had yet to catch his breath when a golden figure streaked through the air with a suffocating pressure. A dreadful aura charged towards him. Although he could only see after images, Su Zimo could guess that the God race leader had attacked. This was an attack filled with rage. His punch contained the boundless wrath and fury of the God race. Su Zimo had almost no stamina left and struggled to raise his heavy right hand to shield himself. Boom. That punch landed heavily on Su Zimo's right hand. The tremendous force sent Su Zimo flying. Snap. His right arm snapped and was completely bent out of shape. Even with his indestructible body, Su Zimo's arm was snapped by the terrifying power released by the God race leader. Thump. His almost invincible and unparalleled body smashed heavily onto the ground like a meteor and created huge dust clouds. Filled with injuries, he laid on the ground motionlessly with his fate unknown. Mud stuck onto all the blood that drenched his body in a horrifying sight. The eyes of many cultivators dimmed. They were clear about the situation. Su Zimo was defeated. In other words, this meant that none of them would be able to leave Myriad Phenomenon City alive. The God race leader had a dark expression. His initially handsome face had turned incomparably menacing and there was no eyeball in his left eye. In its place was a bloody, hollow socket. The area around his injury was burned completely by a scorching power. Ta, ta, ta. The God race leader strode forward step by step with a boundless killing intent in his lone eye. The killing intent was not only targeted at Su Zimo, but at every single cultivator present. Since he destroyed my eye, I shall have all of you die together. The chilling voice of the god race leader echoed through every single corner of Myriad Phenomenon City. Everyone from the god race were incomparably good-looking and were extremely concerned about their appearances. Now that his right eye was destroyed, he would definitely fall out of favor. It was worse than disfigurement. His status within the god race would definitely fall rapidly. Nobody would place him in high regards. Somebody had to pay the price for that. The many cultivators were devastated. Young master. Little Fox cried so badly that her eyes were swollen as she dashed out of the crowd towards Su Zimo. Monkey and the others could not hold back any longer and charged forward as well. Don't come. Suddenly Su Zimo's voice sounded. Although it was weak, his tone was resolute and unquestionable. Everyone stopped in their tracks. Immediately after, in front of countless gazes, the figure that laid in the mud pushed his battered body up with a single arm and slowly rose. Su Zimo strode over slowly. His broken right arm was slumped to the side. Su Zimo's broken arm, connected by a single layer of flesh, swayed gently as he walked as though it could snap at any time. A moment later, Su Zimo walked in front of the cultivators present and shielded them from the god race leader once again. His back view looked frail and wretched. In fact, it seemed as though it could collapse at any moment. However, at that moment all the cultivators were in reverence. Some of them sniffled and could not help but tear. Heis. Monkey Lu sighed deeply. Patron Su, you've tried your best. Perfected Lord Yu Jun had a forlorn expression as he said, it isn't the sin of war. This is a calamity. This is fate. Su Zimo remained silent with his back facing everyone. I don't believe in fate. A moment later he slowly spoke, even if this is fate, I'm going to alter it. Fufufu. The god race leader on the other end suddenly laughed. The socket on his face looked even more gruesome. Illumination Dragon Eye. He snarled and remarked, to think that you've managed to cultivate the Illumination Dragon Eye. Su Zimo was momentarily stunned. The visual technique he cultivated was incredibly strong and was imparted to him by the red-headed ghost at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley. The red-headed ghost did not mention its name and merely named it Illumination Eye based on the illumination stone in his right eye. Could the true name of this visual technique be Illumination Dragon Eye? If it's called the Illumination Dragon Eye, why did the red-headed ghost have to hide it from me? How does the god race know about the origin of this visual technique? Illumination Dragon Eye, Illumination Dragon. Su Zimo furrowed his brows as questions filled his mind. Everything was chaotic and couldn't be explained simply. However, it was not his fault either. The consecutive battles took an immense toll on his body and mental state. If this was during normal times, he would have understood the meaning behind it. Stop pretending. The god race leader sneered. On Tianhuang mainland, the most ferocious and frightening visual techniques belong to the Heavenly Eye race. Apart from the Heavenly Eye race, only the Illumination Dragon Eye can destroy my god's eye. The Heavenly Eye race, one of the primordial 9 races. The god race leader did not conceal the killing intent in his eyes as he barked frostily, I don't care how you are related to the dragon race or how you managed to cultivate that secret skill of the dragon race. It doesn't matter who they are, nobody will be able to save you today. Dragon race. Su Zimo had a blank look on his face. His only connection to the dragon race was the half-dragon egg he consumed back in the Dragon Bone Valley. What has his visual technique got to do with the dragon race? Dragon race, dragon race. Su Zimo frowned and muttered groggily. A terrifying power deep within his bloodline rumbled and slowly awakened. Chapter 779, Dragonification. Chapter 779, Dragonification. The single eye of the god race leader surged with boundless hatred and he emanated a torrential killing intent. Although he did a great deed by locating one of the 7 great ancient unique treasures, the mystic Magnet Mountain, in this trip to the ancient battlefield, the loss he suffered was way too great. His blinded eye was a loss that could not be reversed or salvaged. He could tell that Su Zimo hid a lot of secrets within his body. If he could get his hands on Su Zimo's secrets, he might be able to minimize his losses today. Are you still going to struggle? The god race leader walked slowly towards Su Zimo with an oppressive aura as he said coldly, "Given your current condition, you won't even be able to defend a single finger of mine." Blood was the only thing that could quench the god race leader's fury right now. The distance between the two of them decreased. A destructive power could descend at any moment. It wasn't just Su Zimo. Which of the cultivators present could be lucky enough to survive? Su Zimo looked at the god race leader with a cold gaze. However, there was a restless power within his body that felt like it was going to explode at any moment. The distance between the two of them decreased. When Night Spirit noticed the situation on this side, the killing intent in his eyes intensified as he let out a deep growl. A powerful roar erupted from the depths of his throat. Immediately after, Night Spirit's bones began to transform. Crackling sounds echoed wildly, and in the blink of an eye, an incomparably menacing beast head appeared. It resembled both a wolf and a dog with sharp fangs and purple scales lined its entire surface. Night Spirit did not revert to his true form entirely, and merely his head was in his demon form. Even so, he emanated a shuddering aura. The Rakshasa leader felt his scalp prickle at the sight of Night Spirit. He was unnerved and his hair stood on end. Thereafter, as though he recalled something, his pupils constricted violently as he murmured instinctively, "You are." Before he finished his sentence, he was interrupted by Night Spirit's roar. Immediately after, Night Spirit's speed exploded and he burst towards the Rakshasa leader. The Rakshasa leader was stricken with fear and fled in the reverse direction without hesitation. He did not turn back at all. Swash! A dark shadow tore through the air at an extremely fast speed. Its speed surpassed the speed of the Rakshasa leader and it arrived instantly. Poof! A flash of blood appeared. One of the Rakshasa leader's meat wings was pierced by the black shadow. The black shadow was Night Spirit's tail. His tail was extremely sharp and shone with a cold glint as it swayed in midair like an agile snake. The next moment, Night Spirit grabbed the Rakshasa leader's shoulders with both hands. He lunged forward and chomped down directly on the Rakshasa leader's neck. That single bite almost snapped the Rakshasa leader's neck. "Why you?" The Rakshasa leader's windpipe was crushed and his body convulsed. He had a terrified expression and seemed like he wanted to say something but could not complete the sentence. Night Spirit did not accord him the chance as he bit down on the Rakshasa leaders and twisted viciously. Snap! A massive head was ripped off by Night Spirit. The Rakshasa leader was dead. From the moment Night Spirit started his attack to the death of the Rakshasa leader, everything happened in less than a single breath. Although the scene was shocking, not many people noticed it. That was because almost everyone was drawn towards a sound. Ancient Dragonification art. Su Zimo's voice sounded. "That's a secret skill of the human emperor," Perfected Lord Yujun exclaimed. Nobody expected that Su Zimo would persevere given the circumstances. His spirit energy was depleted and he was unable to release the ancient Dragonification art. However, earlier on, a single thought crossed his mind unfathomably. He could use the power of his inner core to activate the ancient Dragonification art. Su Zimo gathered the remnant demonic power within his body and demonic chi rumbled. With the power of his inner core, he activated the ancient Dragonification art and suddenly summoned a frightening power that lay dormant within the depths of his body for a long time. His blood chi had long deteriorated after the consecutive battles. However, at that moment, his bloodline was ignited with a tremendous wave of life force. Like a cyclone and a tsunami, it surged into every single corner of his corner and cruised through his limbs, washing through his organs. It was painful. Immensely painful. The pain was omnipresent. Su Zimo felt as though his body was about to explode. Roar! He jerked his head upwards violently and howled into the skies. It was bright, loud and penetrated metal and rocks with the aura of an ancient might. The roar seemed as though it was from the primordial era and could shatter stars. In that instant the entire world shook and the weather changed. The howl released from Su Zimo's mouth did not belong to a human. The dragon roar. Perfected Lord Yujun's eyes were widened and his voice quivered. The crowd was shocked. The next moment, right in front of countless gazes, an even more shocking scene unfolded. The broken bone of his right arm began to regenerate. His terrifying bloodline washed through his wounds continuously. His arm was forming once again. Although it could not recover completely within a short period of time, the scene was shocking enough. Su Zimo's tendons and bones echoed together and his body transformed rapidly. His bones twisted and his flesh expanded, joining his muscles together like the roots of a tree and resembled molten steel. Even more frightening than that, green scales appeared on Su Zimo's arms, legs, chest and back. They shone with cold glints and extended rapidly to swiftly line his entire body. His snapped right arm did not change much as it was still recovering. However, his left arm became unusually muscular with green veins all over it. Lined with green scales, it was forceful and possessed a malevolent aura. A green glow flickered from Su Zimo's palms as the scales lined even more densely without any gaps at all. The scales were like blades and a deep green finger joint protruded with an explosive force. That was no longer a palm, it was a claw. The claw was cold and sharp as it gave off a shuddering aura and was not weaker than any weapon. Clang. Instinctively, Su Zimo moved his fingers such that the sharp claws made contact. Instantly, a jarring sound of metal colliding echoed. Su Zimo was stunned when he looked at that strange, gruesome palm of his. The ancient Dragonification art had gone out of his control completely. He had truly transformed into a dragon. Although it was not the same shape as someone from the dragon race, his body no longer looked like a human. Even perfected Lord Yujun was shocked, let alone the cultivators present. As the successor of Enigma Palace, he had naturally heard about the ancient Dragonification art. However, was this the effect of releasing the ancient Dragonification art? Could it really transform a cultivator as such? Su Zimo was puzzled as well. Even if he had activated the ancient Dragonification art using his inner core, it would definitely not result in this transformation. There must be another reason for this. Su Zimo did not have time to think about it. Right now he had something more pressing on hand. He had to get rid of the god race. After his Dragonification, Su Zimo was still unable to use his right arm. However, he could sense that his body became even more terrifying and frightening. It possessed boundless strength. The expression of the god race leader turned extremely grim. Chapter 780 Brute Force. Chapter 780, Brute Force. The current development of the battle had surpassed the control of the god race leader completely. The dragon race was also one of the primordial 9 races. He could clearly sense the frightening aura that emanated from Su Zimo's bloodline. It was extremely pure and possessed boundless might. That was definitely the bloodline of the dragon race. Furthermore, Su Zimo had definitely released a dragon roar earlier on. The god race leader felt an unprecedented pressure. Kill? The 4 god race beings hollered and their blood chi rumbled. Divine might gushed and golden spears appeared in their palms one after another. Mysterious, antiquated runes were etched on the long spears. Judgment Spear. The 4 of them struck at the same time and tossed out the golden spears in their hands. Judgment Spear was a secret skill of the god race to begin with. Now that they threw it with the powerful strength of the god race, the spears arrived almost instantly. Su Zimo had just dragonified and had many questions in his heart. As such, he reacted slower and the 4 golden spears pierced into him. Clang, 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 clang. A metallic sound could be heard. Sparks flew. Right in front of everyone, Su Zimo was pushed backwards by the power of the judgment spears. However, the true terror was that the 4 judgment spears did not manage to penetrate Su Zimo's defense. They were repelled completely by the scales on his body. Prior to this, there were countless cultivators that died to Judgment Spear. Against Judgment Spear, the spirit arts, secret skills, talismans and spirit weapons were like worthless paper. To think that the Judgment Spears couldn't injure Su Zimo at all. Dragon Scales? The god race leader's gaze narrowed. Only genuine dragon scales possess such frightening defensive capabilities. Swash. Su Zimo's figure vanished from the spot. It was too fast. After his Dragonification, Su Zimo even surpassed the Rakshasa leader's movement technique and speed. A god race being was alarmed and felt his scalp prickle. Instantly, he conjured a gigantic golden shield of light in front of him. The moment the shield was formed, a figure smashed onto it violently. Boom. A deafening noise echoed. The golden shield of light was shattered by the figure. The figure merely paused for a brief moment before using the momentum to continue and smash onto the god race being. Instantly, the god race being was sent flying and landed around the feet of many cultivators. Many cultivators turned their gazes towards the god race being. The god race being was initially arrogant and domineering. He looked at all the humans as though they were ants. But now he laid limply on the ground like a dead dog. Everyone could tell that the god race being's meridians were smashed and his tendons and bones were snapped. He was dead. A single blow smashed the god race being to death. Violent, cruel, tough. Boom. It was yet another deafening sound. Another god race being was sent flying by Su Zimo and was already a corpse when he fell from midair. You. The third god race being was about to speak when he felt a malevolent aura surge to his face and force his words back. The wind was so strong that he could barely open his eyes. The god race being channeled his god's eye instantly and a golden light filled his eyes. His vision expanded. All he could see was Su Zimo's tall and mighty figure right in front of him. Swoosh. Su Zimo extended his green claws and grabbed the top of the person's head. The god race being raised both arms upwards to try and defend against Su Zimo's attack. However, Su Zimo was way too strong. The god race being's arms could not handle the blow. The green dragon claw descended and crushed the god race being's head. The final god race being was scared out of his wits and turned to flee. However, he heard a dragon roar the moment he turned. His mind was shaken. The god race being shuddered. He felt a sharp pain in his chest that caused his body to convulse involuntarily. He struggled and looked down. A bloodied claw appeared in front of his chest. Within the palm was a steaming heart. That was his heart. The god race being's head fell to the side and he died on the spot. Everything had happened too quickly. Almost in the blink of an eye, the four god race beings who surrounded Su Zimo initially had all fallen onto the ground and became corpses. Even if the god race leader wanted to step in, he would not have been able to stop Su Zimo. After Su Zimo killed the four god race beings, he did not charge towards the god race leader. Instead, he transformed into a green streak of light in a flash and instantly appeared beside Nian Qi. There had always been a god race being watching over Nian Qi. All of a sudden, the god race being felt uneasy and his eyelids twitched. Before he could react to it, a green light flashed before him. Get lost. Immediately after, he heard a cold voice sound in his ears. God's jurisdiction. The god race being did not hesitate and roared. His bloodline surged as he released his bloodline phenomenon right away. His figure vanished from the spot. In its place was an old, mysterious pyramid. Millions of living beings prostrated around the pyramid and recited prayers sincerely. Su Zimo had a cold gaze and he possessed the might of someone that looked down on all life. He extended his left hand and gripped his dragon claw into a fist to pummel fiercely on the pyramid. Bang! Boom! Boom! The pyramid that had just formed collapsed instantly against Su Zimo's punch. Even a bloodline phenomenon could not withstand a single punch from Su Zimo. There was no technique or skill involved. It was absolute strength. He was overwhelming everything with brute force. There was nothing that could stop the rampage of the dragon race. The pyramid collapsed and the god race being who was connected to it coughed out a mouthful of fresh blood with a shocked expression. Before his figure could descend, Su Zimo threw out a second punch. Another god race being was dead. Su Zimo reached out with his sharp nails and scratched across the ropes on Nian Qi's body gently. The ropes snapped instantly. Finally Nian Qi was free. Thank you, young master. She teared in joy. Su Zimo nodded and turned around, walking step by step towards the god race leader. He emanated a torrential ferocity and his gaze was deadly. To be able to cultivate to his level and become a leader among the god race beings of his generation, the god race leader was definitely not a cowardly man. Furthermore, he had no way of retreat. He was now the only person left among the 7 god race beings that entered the ancient battlefield. It was impossible even if he wanted to escape. He had to fight with his life. Well. The god race leader had a grim expression and his lone eye flickered violently. There was no hint of fear as he said with a cold voice, "Today, we'll see if you can manage to slay a god or if I'll become famous for killing a dragon. Judgment sword, form with my blood of the god race." The god race leader chanted loudly and cut his wrist with his hand. Fresh, golden blood splattered through the void and did not disperse. The amount of golden blood gathered increased. The god race leader's expression turned paler as well. Right in front of everyone, the golden blood slowly converged to form a gigantic golden sword with a terrifying aura. It seemed like it could slice through everything. That was a gigantic sword that was created from the essence blood of the god race leader. Every single portion of the sword possessed the purest and most terrifying power of the god race bloodline. Although this sword was created from blood, it was even more terrifying than Khanate spirit weapons. The god race leader believed that even Su Zimo's dragon scales won't be able to defend against the sharpness of the judgment sword. Chapter 781 Settled Dust. Chapter 781, Settled Dust. Clang. The gigantic golden sword in the hands of the god race leader let out blinding rays and his aura exploded. In a flash he burst toward Su Zimo. Su Zimo's gaze was cold and he did not avoid or dodge. He reached out with his muscular, strong arms and used his sharp dragon claws to grab the gigantic golden sword. Clang. The sword and claw clashed with a jarring sound. A line of sparks appeared along the blade of the sword. Although the gigantic golden sword was sharp, it could not cut away the terrifying claws. A dragon's claw was the toughest part of its body. The sword was repelled high into the air. The expression of the god race leader changed starkly. That single clash made him realize that he could no longer take on the dragonified Su Zimo head-on with his current strength. The bloodline of the dragon race was not the only thing flowing through Su Zimo's body after his dragonification. His powerful bloodline cultivated from the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness flowed within his body as well. Not only that, the dragonification process started from the human emperor's secret skill. In other words, by some freak coincidence, Su Zimo managed to combine multiple powerful techniques together. The might of his dragonification was imaginable. Boom. Su Zimo's aura rose and he leaned forward, arriving before the god race with a heavy stomp. The ground shook and the mountains trembled. Roar. The dragon roar echoed through the world relentlessly. Su Zimo reached out with outstretched fingers and his gigantic, scary dragon claw blanketed over the god race leader's head as it grabbed down. The god race leader grit his teeth and retracted his sword to defend. Clang. It was yet another head-on collision. The bloodline on the gigantic golden sword was shaken considerably and its blood chi dissipated. The god race leader's expression turned even paler. The bloodline of the god race was terrifying, and because they were physically strong, they were the best in melee combat among the primordial 9 races. However, against Su Zimo's hand, the god race leader felt an unprecedented danger. Their exchange of blows became even faster, and the only thing that could be seen was 2 figures intersecting in a flurry in midair. They were almost like afterimages and could not be seen clearly. Many cultivators could only hear shuddering collision sounds echoing endlessly. Although Su Zimo's right arm was snapped and had yet to recover completely, he had an overwhelming advantage against the god race leader in terms of strength and speed after his dragonification. Furthermore, he was almost invincible in melee combat after cultivating the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. Once he had the upper hand, it was almost impossible for his opponents to reverse the tides. 10 short breaths. Within that short period of time, the two of them had already exchanged more than 100 blows. The 100 blows were each extremely dangerous. A single mistake would have led to their deaths. Boom. It was yet another deafening sound. 2 figures collided and split apart instantly, returning firmly to their original positions. Many cultivators watched with bated breaths. Both figures were motionless and it was impossible to tell who won. Finally, the god race leader let out a deep breath of air. The golden glow on his gigantic golden sword dimmed and turned into a ball of golden blood that splashed onto the ground. A ball of fresh blood oozed from his chest as well, increasing uncontrollably in size as time passed. His gaze gradually went blank also. It was a sign that he was at the end of his life. On the other side, there were less than 10 Rakshasas remaining after the Rakshasa leader was killed by Night Spirit, and all of them fled for their lives. Night Spirit was relieved when he saw that Su Zimo was fine. After a quick glance at Su Zimo, he chased down the remaining Rakshasas in a flash. Su Zimo could vaguely guess that Night Spirit was probably hunting down the rest of the Rakshasas because he was worried his secret might be leaked. Unfortunately, I fell a little short. The god race leader glared at Su Zimo and slowly said, "If I could kill you, the situation would be entirely different right now. However, it's nothing much either." He gave a bitter laugh. "I've said that the age of the human race has long passed. Today's battle merely proved my point further." "Oh, the Rakshasa and god race has been completely annihilated in today's battle." Su Zimo sneered. And what about that? The human race has lived in peace for way too long and no longer possesses the same fighting spirit of the past. The god race leader pointed at the cultivators at the front and shook his head in laughter. Look at the grim faces of your so-called human paragons. They did not even have the courage to resist when they faced us of the god race. How can you guys even rule over Tianhuang mainland? Su Zimo, while you may have won today, you are just one person. A single person won't be able to save the entire human race. Furthermore, look at the state you are in right now. All the cultivators will merely take you as a fiend demon, as someone of a foreign race. Before the god race even takes revenge for me, you will be outcast from the cultivation world of the human race. Su Zimo was silent. The god race leader was not wrong about some things. Even though he killed the god race in Myriad Phenomenon City today and rescued the cultivators behind him, it did not mean that he would be able to fit in the cultivation world outside. The human race loves internal strife. Ah. The god race leader laughed in a deranged manner as fresh blood oozed from the corners of his lips. The bloodline of the god race was terrifying and they had an extremely strong life force. Even though his internal organs were ruptured at that moment and his chest was pierced by Su Zimo's dragon claw, he was still hanging on to life and was not dead yet. You are wrong, I'm not alone. Su Zimo looked calmly at the god race leader and said, there are countless human cultivators out there. You have not seen everyone else who is the same as me. Back then, when the Blood Crow Palace formed an alliance with the other four major sects of the Great Zhou dynasty to invade Ethereal Peak along with many itinerant cultivators and experts, the situation was dire. Even the Great Zhou dynasty did not dare to go against them. However, somebody dared to. The Azura Yen Beichin. He arrived at Ethereal Peak and injured the Palace Lord of Blood Crow Palace severely with his Azura saber. It did not matter what race or origin they were from, he slew everyone in his path. Su Zimo believed that if Yen Beichin was the one here, he would have attacked without retreating as well. Previously, he got into big trouble when he consumed the dragon egg in the Dragon Bone Valley. A true dragon was drawn out and hunted him all the way to the capital of Great Zhou. A mysterious old man attacked and pushed back the true dragon. What sort of boldness was that? Notwithstanding those people, even among Myriad Phenomenon City, apart from him, Lin Xuanji, Little Fatty, Demoness Ji, Jiqingtian and the others stood out one after another and fought with their lives to protect the final shred of dignity of the human race. The path ahead is long. Su Zimo looked at Little Fatty and the others as he said calmly, they might not be able to compare to the primordial 9 races right now, but the day will come when they will be able to match you guys. Humans were innately weak, but they possessed boundless potential and even gave birth to an existence like the eternal human emperor that brought fear throughout history. The primordial 9 races could not do anything but avoid him and live an ignoble existence. The glint in the eyes of the god race leader dimmed gradually. Not long after, his body fell with a thud and no longer breathed. Everything was over, the dust was settled. Many cultivators were finally relieved of their pressure. Everyone felt as though they had just escaped death. There was an indescribable joy. Every single cultivator had a conflicted expression as they gazed at Su Zimo, who was soaked in blood and the corpses strewn across the city. Prior to this, many among them shouted at Su Zimo and wanted to kill him, attacking Little Fatty, Xiaoning and the others as well. But now their lives were saved by Su Zimo. At the thought of that, many cultivators looked ashamed and even guilty. Chapter 782 Stir. Chapter 782, Stir. The power of Su Zimo's inner core was completely expended after his consecutive battles. The dragon scales on his body faded away gradually and he reverted to his original appearance right in front of countless gazes. His black hair danced and he looked like a refined scholar with his clear eyes. If they had not seen it themselves, nobody would have imagined that the 100-foot-tall ancient demon with a humongous body, the frightening existence with sharp fangs and claws and was lined with dragon scales, was actually this refined scholar before them. Who could have imagined that this seemingly frail scholar almost resolved the earth-shaking catastrophe single-handedly? He stopped the dam from breaking through, a tower from toppling. This was the number 1 of the phenomenon ranking. The impact of this battle was immensely huge on the cultivators who survived. The impact was not only on their cultivation realm and mental state, it even changed their understanding of the 10,000 races, the cultivation world and Tianhuang mainland. Many cultivators gained a true realization of the difference between them and the primordial 9 races. Although they were in the same cultivation realm, they were completely helpless against the Rakshasa and God race. Su Zimo's figure shuddered for a moment and he experienced waves of weakness from within his body. His tongue went dry, his head spun and a deeply exhausted look appeared on his face. Young master. 2 figures dashed forward at almost the same time and exclaimed. They were Nian and Little Fox. Su Zimo smiled and said softly, I'm fine. Young master, it's all my fault. Nian looked ashamed as she pursed her lips. If it wasn't for me. Even if you weren't here, this battle would have been unavoidable. Su Zimo interrupted Nian. Lin Xuanji, Little Fatty and the others circled over as well. Brother Su, it's all thanks to you this time round. Lin Xuanji was no longer in his happy-go-lucky attitude and bowed deeply to Su Zimo with a solemn expression. There's no need to speak of such things between us. Su Zimo thumped Lin Xuanji on the chest and chuckled. Back in the Dragon Bone Valley, Su Zimo would have died if it wasn't for Lin Xuanji. Su Zimo suspected that the mysterious old man that appeared in the capital of Great Zhou later on had something to do with Lin Xuanji as well and might even be a powerful figure of Enigma Palace. Xiaoning's eyes were red and swollen, a clear sign that she had just cried. She handed Su Zimo a few elixirs and only looked relieved after he consumed them. Little Fatty rolled his eyes. Boss, I'll go help you collect the treasures and bring them over for you. There were rivers of blood and corpses strewn all over Myriad Phenomenon City after the earth-shaking battle. However, there were countless treasures within the rivers of blood and corpses. The most important among them was the mystic Magnet Mountain, which was one of the 7 ancient unique treasures. Most of the treasures no longer had any owners and Little Fatty offered to help Su Zimo collect them because he was worried that others might steal them sneakily. Su Zimo said deeply, help me collect the storage bags of the Rakshasa and God race as well as the mystic Magnet Mountain. There's no need to take the storage bags of the other cultivators. Let the surviving cultivators retrieve the belongings of their own sections. Su Zimo could take the storage bags of the Rakshasa and God race with a peace of mind. However, he did not wish to lay his hands on the belongings of the 50,000 cultivators that died here. Perfected Lord Yu Jun nodded in silence when he saw that. No matter what, his character alone was superior to way too many people. Little Fatty helped to collect the bronze square tripod and other treasures and handed them to Su Zimo. Fufufu. Suddenly, a chuckle came not far away. A cultivator stood on Zephyr Thunder and arrived before everyone at an extremely fast speed. He stood on midair and looked down upon the masses. Tianming. Perfected Lord Luo Shui frowned. It was Perfected Lord Tianming of Zephyr Thunder Palace who had escaped from Myriad Phenomenon City earlier on. Perfected Lord Tianming surveyed the surroundings and his gaze lingered on Su Zimo for a long time, coveting the storage bag on the latter's waist with a greedy look. Su Zimo lowered his eyes slightly without saying anything. The hearts of Perfected Lord Yu Jun and the other 2 sank upon the sight of Perfected Lord Tianming's return. Su Zimo was completely spent by now. Although he had just consumed elixirs, there was no way he could absorb the medicinal effects within a short period of time. Night Spirit had already left to hunt down the remaining Rakshasas. The 3 of them were severely injured and their wounds would open up if they made any large movements. There was no way they could fight. The other cultivators were all golden cores and almost everyone was injured. If Perfected Lord Tianming harbored evil intentions, nobody could stop him. Perfected Lord Yu Jun asked indifferently with no emotions, Tianming, since you've already fled, what are you doing here again? When the Rakshasa race attacked, the Rakshasa leader chased after Perfected Lord Tianming. The reason why Perfected Lord Tianming survived was because the 3 Perfected Lords saved him in the nick of things. Yet, Perfected Lord Tianming turned to flee and left the 3 of them in a precarious situation. The 3 of them harbored immense detest towards this person. If they were not severely injured and in a bad state, Perfected Lord Luo Shui might have already attacked him given her temper. Fellow Taoist Yu Jun, what are you saying? Perfected Lord Tianming smiled gently. I meant to sacrifice myself by luring away the Rakshasa leader when I left Myriad Phenomenon City. To think that he didn't chase after me. When I noticed that, I headed back immediately with the intention of fighting the Rakshasa race to the death. Seems like I was a bit too late. His explanation was filled with loopholes and even a child would not believe him, let alone the 3 nascent souls. Many cultivators of Zephyr Thunder Palace felt their cheeks burning in shame. Shameless coward. Perfected Lord Luo Shui could not help but chide. Humph. Perfected Lord Tianming replied coolly, Luo Shui, you've got to watch your words. I can kill you with ease given your current condition. It's best if you don't provoke me. Perfected Lord Luo Shui stood up furiously. Despite the rupturing of her wounds, she shouted with dignity, Tianming, you are nothing but a coward that ran off with his tail between his legs in front of the Rakshasa race. How dare you get cocky in front of me? Perfected Lord Tianming's expression darkened and his gaze shimmered. He looked at Perfected Lord Luo Shui for a long time before retracting his gaze and repressing his killing intent. Right now, he had something more pressing on hand and did not want to waste time with others. Perfected Lord Tianming said indifferently, on account of the fact that you're someone from Snowdrift Valley and you're a woman as well, I'll spare your life for the time being. I've returned to deal with something else. With that said, he turned to look at Su Zimo. Junior, hand over your storage bag and I'll spare your life. Perfected Lord Tianming said coldly with an indifferent expression. The crowd gradually went silent. Many cultivators looked indignant but they did not dare to speak up. Tianming, what's the meaning of this? Perfected Lord Yu Jun repressed his fury as much as he could and said with a deep voice, this catastrophe was resolved because of Su Zimo. Yet, you're trying to hit him when he's down now? You're making things sound too serious. Perfected Lord Tianming replied, he possesses the secret skill of Zephyr Thunder Palace, the Perfected Lord Tianming. I'm merely retrieving the secret skill of my sect. What do you mean by hitting him when he's down? Since your intention is to retrieve the Purple Thunder Manual, why do you need his storage bag? Monkey Lu questioned. Perfected Lord Tianming chuckled. Who knows what else he's keeping in his storage bag? There might be other treasures from Zephyr Thunder Palace apart from the Purple Thunder Manual. I'll do a quick check and retrieve everything at one go. He was almost blatantly committing a robbery. He's clearly taking advantage of the situation and yet he puts it across so righteously. How shameless. Little Fatty could not help but curse. Lin Xuanji and the others were enraged as well. Chapter 783 Evil of Men. Chapter 783 Evil of Men. Perfected Lord Tianming's heart was burning. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Right now, all the cultivators in Myriad Phenomenon City were either exhausted or seriously injured. Nobody could stop him. Initially, he was wary about that black-robed man named Night Spirit. But Night Spirit had already left Myriad Phenomenon City in pursuit of the remaining Rakshasas. Although there were not many Rakshasas left, they fled in all directions. It was impossible for Night Spirit to hunt them down within a short period of time. As long as he could get his hands on Su Zimo's storage bag as soon as possible and flee far away to hide, nobody would be able to find him in this vast ancient battlefield. Although it was quite a dishonorable act, he had his way of explaining things upon his return to Tianhuang mainland. After all, nobody could blame him if he did it to retrieve Zephyr Thunder Palace's secret skill. Tianming, don't forget that there are more than 50,000 paragons here as well. Perfected Lord Yu Jun said deeply, you've got to get through them before you can get your hands on Su Zimo's storage bag. Even if we're severely injured, do you think you can defend against 50,000 cultivators single-handedly? That's right. Pang Yu of Overlord Palace stood out. Although his face was pale, he patted his chest and declared loudly, it's all thanks to fellow Taoist Su that we're alive today. If you want to lay your hands on him, I'll be the first to stand out. You'll have to get through my sword to get to him. Dugu Jian remarked coldly. Within the crowd, cultivators stood out one after another. Some of them were familiar while others were foreign. There were both opponents and friends of the past. Of course, most of the cultivators remained silent. Some of them wanted to speak but stopped. Some of them looked on with hesitant expressions while others watched by the sidelines. Instantly, the different types of characters were revealed completely. Perfected Lord Tianming's lips curled when he noticed that. He composed himself further and shouted, everyone don't be foolish. Su Zimo is still someone of a foreign race. The reason why he stood in was to rescue his friends. He doesn't care about whether you guys live or die. There are many among you who once encircled and attacked his friends. Who knows, he might even want to get even with you guys after his injuries are healed. A stir broke out amongst the crowd. Perfected Lord Tianming's words resonated with some of the cultivators. He laughed even brighter when he saw that. Nobody knows if he'll want to try and kill you tomorrow even if you protect him today. Perfected Lord Tianming's beguiling voice continued on, don't forget he's from a foreign race. Who can guarantee that he won't treat you the same way as the Rakshasa and God race did? Don't forget the old saying, those that are not of our race are our enemies. The Perfected Lord isn't entirely wrong. That's right, he did not fight against the Rakshasa and God race for our sake. There's no need for us to protect him. This man even took on the dragon race's form earlier. The dragon race is one of the primordial 9 races and they aren't much better than the Rakshasa and God race. Discussions broke out among the crowd. However, they were soft and were not overwhelming. Demonish G gave an ironic laugh at the sight of that. Today I finally know what it means to beget kindness with evil. This is nothing more than the evil of men's nature. That is human nature indeed. Lin Xuanji sighed. Mortals assume that all cultivators are righteous without any desires. However, they don't know that cultivators actually possess the deepest desires. The cultivation world is no paradise and is much crueler than the secular world. There's schemes and plots to kill others for their treasures everywhere. Some cultivators can resort to any means for the sake of longevity and strength. What difference does it make if they beget kindness with evil? All of you listen up. Suddenly, Perfected Lord Yujun bellowed. Although his arm injury split open immediately and blood gushed out, he was indifferent towards it. It doesn't matter if Su Zimo is a demon or a dragon. In this world, anyone can attack him, but not all of you. He pointed to the vast crowd of more than 50,000 cultivators with a stern expression as he said word by word, that's because all of you here owe him your lives. The clamor within the crowd quietened down gradually once again. Monk Yin Lu clasped his palms today and uttered a Buddhist proclamation softly before saying, I don't know about sayings regarding other races and the rights or wrongs of the world. However, I know one thing. He saved all of us here and almost killed himself in the process. All of us would be dead right now if it wasn't for him. We would be spirits in the hands of the God race and food in the hands of the Rakshasa race. While I don't know what is right or wrong, I know what is gratitude and loyalty. His impassioned words were firm and deafening. Some people lowered their heads while others had guilty expressions. Perfected Lord Tianming's expression was dark. When he saw that the situation was shifting away from his favor, he could not help but declare coldly, Monk Yin Lu, don't try to confuse everyone with your falsehoods. At that moment, Perfected Lord Tianming was already prepared to attack. He could not let things drag on anymore. The longer things dragged on, the worse the situation would be for him. Once Night Spirit returned, it would be too late even if he wanted to escape. Right now, the remaining 50,000 cultivators had different interests and were not united. He could succeed as long as not many people stood on Su Zimo's side. Disciples of Zephyr Thunder Palace, heed my orders. Kill anyone who dares to stand in my way. Perfected Lord Tianming's killing intent blazed and his glabella glowed brightly. A series of erratic thunderbolts appeared within his palm with a terrifying aura. Protect the young master. Protect Brother Su. Nian Qi, Lin Xuanji and the others circled around Su Zimo instantly to form a human wall. Fufu, why do you have to go through the trouble? Suddenly Su Zimo laughed softly. I'll give you my storage bag if you want it. Su Zimo patted little Fatty who was standing in front of him on the shoulder and gestured for the latter to make way. Boss? Little Fatty asked softly with an inquiring look in his eyes. It's fine, move away. Su Zimo nodded calmly with a smile. Everyone exchanged glances and, although hesitant, made a path. Slowly, Su Zimo walked out and removed the storage bag on his waist. He looked at Perfected Lord Tianming who was not far away and held it up in the air as he said indifferently, the storage bag is right here. Come and take it if you want it. Perfected Lord Tianming's pupils constricted slightly. His spirit consciousness had long scanned Su Zimo's body multiple times and he could confirm that this lad's blood chi was weak and his spirit energy was depleted. There was definitely no way he could fight any longer. However, what was this lad trying to do? Although Su Zimo looked exhausted, there was no hint of panic on his face and he looked calm. Hee. Perfected Lord Tianming remembered something and sneered, you sure are scheming, lad. You're trying to lure me in so that you can release your killing move, right? You're way too naive, there's no way you can hide your intentions from me. In reality, even if he were to close in, he would not be in much danger given Su Zimo's current condition. However, it did not hurt to be careful. I'm handing my storage bag over to you and yet you don't even dare to collect it yourself. Su Zimo retracted his smile and hung his storage bag on his waist again before saying coldly, "How can you even dream of taking my life given your cowardice? Tianming, let me tell you one thing. Even if I'm completely exhausted, I can still kill you." Chapter 784, Encompassing Blood Qi. Chapter 784, Encompassing Blood Qi. Many cultivators were stunned. Nobody could understand how Su Zimo, who was seemingly battered, could go against a nascent soul. Su Zimo walked slowly towards perfected Lord Tianming with an overwhelming aura. The bloodstains splattered on the ground formed thin threads that surged towards Su Zimo's body in a wild manner, as though they were drawn in by a mysterious power. Su Zimo's body seemed to have transformed into a black hole that could consume blood as it drew in the endless power from the fresh blood on the battlefield that had yet to dry up. The aura around Su Zimo became increasingly evil. His blood qi was torrential and he was like an Asura that walked out from hell. Many cultivators felt their hearts palpitate and it was as though they were about to be sucked into the black hole when they glanced at it briefly. In fact, many cultivators felt their bloodlines rumble involuntarily. What sort of powers were these? Everyone was horrified. This is... Perfected Lord Yu Jun frowned and pondered for a moment. Suddenly, he exclaimed as though he recalled something, "The Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra." All the cultivators present were shocked when they heard his remark. The Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra was extremely powerful. Countless thousand years ago, a fiend of Asura sect created the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra and massacred the masses. He created a blood storm throughout the cultivation world that nobody could stop. This fiend of Asura sect was the notorious Dao Lord Blood Fiend. Back then, Dao Lord Blood Fiend was the titular disciple of Asura sect and was invincible across the same cultivation realm. Although he was not at the Dharma characteristic realm, his combat strength could match conjoint bodies. In fact, many conjoint bodies did not dare to challenge him. The Mahayana realm came above the conjoint body realm. Everybody at the Mahayana realm were all patriarchs that rarely appeared. They were untraceable. During that period of time, although there were many experts that formed alliances to try and kill Dao Lord Blood Fiend, he was crafty and would escape 1,000 miles when he detected the slightest activity. All the experts failed one after another. Later on, there were even rumors that a patriarch of the immortal sects showed himself to deal with this matter. Although Dao Lord Blood Fiend was severely injured, he managed to escape with the use of a terrifying escape technique. The fact that a Mahayana patriarch appeared to stop a Dharma characteristic Dao Lord was shocking enough, let alone his escape from the patriarch. This matter created an earth-shaking battle between the immortal and fiend sections. Dao Lord Blood Fiend's reputation was spread far and wide. Everybody knew that with his endowment, he would definitely become an emperor if he continued cultivating. Furthermore, his combat strength would be comparable to the ancient emperors. He would definitely be a catastrophe to the entire cultivation world and the living masses. Finally, a monk appeared from seclusion. This monk was the titular disciple of Daming Monastery for that generation, Monk Daming. Before he appeared, there was no news of him in the world. In fact, there were few who had heard of him in the entire cultivation world. It was only after Monk Daming appeared and engaged Dao Lord Blood Fiend in a massive battle that ended in a draw that his reputation was spread throughout the world. Later on, the two of them fought countless times, but all of them ended in draws. Finally, an outcome was determined during their fourth fight. The ending of the great battle was a mystery for the entire cultivation world. Nobody knew the exact story. The most famous rumor was that both monster incarnates died. However, neither of their corpses or bones could be found after that fight. 3 of the Mingwang prayer beads were lost during that battle as well. Even until now, the location of 2 of them was unknown. The Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra was lost too. Nobody expected this Fiend Sutra that was the most nefarious and evil during that period of time to appear once again today. Unknowingly, Su Zimo had an innate disdain towards this cultivation technique. He was even more resistant to a secret skill that devoured blood. Up till this point of his cultivation, he had only released it once. It was back in Songlang Mountain Range when he had just obtained Night Spirit. His bloodline was being consumed by Night Spirit and he had no other choice but to release that secret skill in order to survive. When he fought against the God race earlier on and was almost completely exhausted, the thought of using the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra crossed Su Zimo's mind as well. However, firstly, he had always been resistant towards it. Secondly, the blood that flowed through Myriad Phenomenon City was almost entirely from human cultivators. He truly did not wish to consume the blood of people from his own race. But now, the blood that he was devouring was not from humans, but from the Rakshasa and God race. Compared to the tens of thousands of human cultivators, there were only slightly more than 100 Rakshasa and God race beings. However, their bloodlines possessed tremendous power of blood. All of that power was gushing into Su Zimo's body relentlessly. Su Zimo's aura was on the rise. Kill. 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 His eyes became bloodshot and his pupils were almost completely dyed red as the thought of killing filled his mind. He wished for nothing more than to slaughter all the living beings before him. That was the frightening part of the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra. It could even affect a cultivator's mind and determination. Right now, Su Zimo had both demonic and immortality cultivation and he had also comprehended the Zen of Buddhism. As such, his mind was clear and his firm determination was unwavering. Even so, he showed signs of turning into a fiend while he channeled the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra. Blood scars appeared on Su Zimo's face, arms and chest and extended in all directions in a terrifying manner. Torrential blood chi emanated from Su Zimo with every single step he took towards perfected Lord Tianming. His black hair was gradually dyed red and danced in midair while the blood shade in his eyes deepened. Perfected Lord Tianming felt his scalp prickle and hair stand on end at the sight of Su Zimo in that state. A tremendous pressure gushed over. Even Little Fatty and the others who surrounded Su Zimo initially retreated with fearful eyes, let alone him. Fiend, don't you dare be insolent. Perfected Lord Tianming mustered his courage and hollered. His glabella flashed and he pointed forward, shooting a blinding thunderbolt from his finger onto Su Zimo's head. However, before the thunderbolt struck, it was dispersed by the blood chi around Su Zimo. Not good. Perfected Lord Tianming grit his teeth and a conflicted look flashed through his eyes. However, he made a decision instantly and turned to flee. He would have died countless times if he was not so decisive. Since he wanted to escape, he had to flee with all his might and not hesitate. Perfected Lord Tianming clearly knew that even with the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra, Su Zimo merely recovered his power of bloodline. Su Zimo's spirit and demonic energies were both expended and there was no way he could catch up to him. However, he did not get careless and released Zephyr Thunder Escape. Perfected Lord Tianming rode on Zephyr Thunder and vanished from the spot as he fled into the distance. You're still trying to escape. Su Zimo's voice sounded chilling to the bones. When the word, still, sounded, the both of them were at least 1,000 feet apart. When the word, trying sounded, the both of them were less than 500 feet apart. By the time the final word sounded, Perfected Lord Tianming could even feel Su Zimo's breath. It was a breath with a hint of blood stench. He was close by. Perfected Lord Tianming's eyes widened and he suddenly recalled something. Rumors had it that within the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra, there was a fearsome blood escape technique. Could it be? Before that thought was finished, an encompassing blood chi had already engulfed him. Chapter 785, Reward for the Number 1. Chapter 785, Reward for the Number 1. Green Thunder Armor. Perfected Lord Tianming's eyes widened and he roared as he channeled his essence spirit wildly. Dermic powers surged and rays of green-colored thunderbolts sizzled across the surface of his body in a blinding manner. At that moment, the blood chi had surged over and engulfed his body entirely. Outsiders could merely see a massive blood mist that rumbled in midair. It was grisly scarlet. Green thunderbolts could be seen faintly flashing from within the blood mist. However, nobody could see the figures of both people within. The Green Thunder armor released by Perfected Lord Tianming was a secret skill from the Heaven-grade cultivation technique, the Green Thunder Manual. It made use of dermic powers to create an armor of thunder around the surface of one's body to defend against harm. It was a cultivation technique passed down by the Thunder Emperor and was extremely powerful. Coupled with the fact that the power of thunder had an extreme yang nature and was tough, it was the most effective in countering evil and demons. Perfected Lord Tianming should be the one with an advantage in a clash of power as such. However, that was not the case. Crackle. There was a jarring sound. The glow of the green thunder dimmed rapidly when it collided against the rich blood chi. One after another, streams of scarlet blood chi crawled across Perfected Lord Tianming's thunder armor vest endlessly like spirit snakes and penetrated every single opening. The Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra was a cultivation technique of the evil fiends. However, right now, Su Zimo was using the power of his bloodline. Even the god race of the primordial 9 races could not match his bloodline. Ah! Perfected Lord Tianming howled. He could clearly sense the blood within his body rumbling in an uncontrollable manner. His bloodline was expanding. His heart raced and seemed like it was about to explode. His bloodline was about to burst forth from his body. Legend has it that back in the past, when Tao Lord Blood Fiend cultivated to his peak, all he had to do was open his mouth slightly and weaker cultivators would have their essence blood devoured in the blink of an eye helplessly. It was extremely terrifying. Even the ancient emperors might not be comparable to the Tao Lord Blood Fiend in terms of cultivation comprehension of one's bloodline. Poof. The stalemate did not last for long before Perfected Lord Tianming turned into a ball of blood. His essence blood was drawn out from his body completely and fused within the blood mist in midair. His essence spirit was destroyed instantly with the rush of the blood chi. It was a true annihilation of his body and spirit. It's over. Perfected Lord Yujun and the other two sensed it the moment Perfected Lord Tianming died. The fight for the phenomenon ranking this time round was filled with turmoils and bloodshed. Finally, everything came to an end. The Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra has reappeared once more. I truly don't know if this is a blessing or misfortune for Tianhuang mainland, Monk Yin Lu sighed internally. Perfected Lord Yujun turned over as well. Both of them could see the worry in the other's eyes. The blood mist in midair swiveled slowly and formed a gigantic vortex. Finally, everything converged into Su Zimo's body and eventually vanished. Su Zimo stood in midair and his blood-colored long hair danced. His eyes were bloodshot and the murderous, evil aura he emanated was shuddering. Many cultivators merely glanced at his bloodshot eyes and felt their blood cheese rumble as their hearts pounded. Right now, it was clear that Su Zimo's mental state was affected and he might veer onto the wrong path. If he were to conduct a massacre right now, nobody would be able to stop him. Silence engulfed Myriad Phenomenon City. Out of more than 50,000 cultivators, nobody dared to speak. They were afraid that they might trigger Su Zimo with the slightest activity and get themselves killed. After a period of time, Su Zimo's bloodshot eyes faded and his blood-colored hair returned to normal as well. He descended slowly and swept his cold gaze across the crowd not far away. The cultivators who were discussing whether Su Zimo should be killed earlier on had their heads slumped and did not dare to meet his gaze. Previously, there were quite a number among them who even encircled and attacked Little Fatty and the others. If Su Zimo wanted to make them pay for it, none of them would be able to escape. Many cultivators were jittery and had frightful expressions. After a long silence, Su Zimo slowly said, "There have been too many people who have died today. I don't wish to kill any more, all of you can leave." Many cultivators left hurriedly in relief. Right now, the power of Su Zimo's inner core and golden core has dried up completely. However, his bloodline was more than half recovered after what he devoured. The feeling of control was nice. In fact, Su Zimo had an urge to devour and refine all the bloodlines of the cultivators who had died in Myriad Phenomenon City into his body. It was an extremely frightening thought. If he could not control it, there was a chance that he could turn into a murderous fiend. This Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra is truly evil. I must not use it anymore in the future. Su Zimo thought to himself. The death of Perfected Lord Tianming meant that the catastrophe of Myriad Phenomenon City had ended completely. The cultivators who survived gathered with their sect mates and consumed elixirs and medicine. Some of the itinerant cultivators went their own ways. They did not leave the city but instead found quiet spots to rest and recuperate. Brothers Su, fellow Taoists. Lin Xuanji cupped his fists towards Su Zimo, Little Fatty and the others. Everyone is severely injured right now. If you leave Myriad Phenomenon City at this time, chances are you will come across ferocious beasts that wander around the ancient battlefield. Please rest well in the city first before making further plans. All right. Su Zimo contemplated briefly and agreed to it. With this, There was no longer a need for him to stay in Myriad Phenomenon City. However, he was in no rush and might as well recuperate here as he awaited Night Spirit's return. Right? Lin Xuanji thought for a moment and continued, "You're number 1 for the Golden Core Phenomenon ranking this time round. There's rewards for you." Normally speaking, the cultivators of Enigma Palace would disseminate the rewards for the cultivators based on their rankings after the phenomenon ranking was confirmed. However, too many things had happened for the fight of the phenomenon ranking this time round. Although there was an outcome between Su Zimo and Di Yin's fight, it caused a fight between the nascent souls as well. Furthermore, the two of them killed their way out of Myriad Phenomenon City one after the other. By the time Su Zimo returned, the Rakshasa and God race had already arrived and there was no chance for him to receive his rewards. Fame was secondary to Su Zimo when he fought for the top of the phenomenon ranking. The rewards were the main draw. The rewards for the number 1 of the phenomenon ranking were extremely enticing. There was even a chance for him to get his hands on heaven-grade cultivation techniques or Khanate dermic weapons. Su Zimo would definitely advance to the nascent soul realm if nothing untoward happened after he left the ancient battlefield. Even at this moment he did not possess a Khanate dermic weapon that belonged to him. The old monk at the Dragon Burial Valley told him that if he could obtain a Khanate dermic weapon when he was at nascent soul realm, he could refine it to become his destiny dermic weapon. The power and level of the dermic weapon would rise alongside his own cultivation realm. However, its grade would not change and would always be a Khanate grade. Although Su Zimo looked forward to the rewards as the number 1 of the phenomenon ranking, he knew that now was not the time for it. Myriad Phenomenon City was a tragic sight with rivers of blood and corpses strewn everywhere. Many cultivators were severely injured and perfected Lord Yujun had even lost an arm. "There's no rush." Su Zimo replied, "We'll talk about it after Senior Yujun recovers. I'll stay in the city for a period of time." "That's good." Lin Xuanji smiled and nodded. The rewards for the number 1 of the phenomenon ranking were extraordinary and required a nascent soul of Enigma Palace to channel his essence spirit using Enigma Palace's secret skill to activate the ancient phenomenon steel. The ancient phenomenon steel had a dimension of its own. Within it were countless mystical treasures, weapons and cultivation techniques. The sort of treasures one would obtain would depend on his fortune and fate. Chapter 786 Nian Qi's Identity. Chapter 786 Nian Qi's Identity. Su Zimo's group settled down in the Grand Hall of Enigma Palace for the time being. Everyone was rather severely injured and thankfully, their conditions turned better after they consumed the elixirs provided by Xiaoning and rested for a couple of days. It would take around a month for them to recover fully. Su Zimo's body was pierced by the sharp thorns of the Rakshasa race's chain and his right arm was severed by the God race leader. His stamina was completely spent after his consecutive battles. However, it merely took a few days for him to mostly heal up and the injuries left by the sharp thorn chain were completely recovered and scabs had even formed. His severed right arm was joined together again. A few more days and he would be perfectly fine as before. His regeneration speed was something that even the 3 nascent souls could not match. Will anything happen to Night Spirit? It had been a few days since Night Spirit chased after the remaining Rakshasas but he had yet to return. Worried, Qing could not help but ask. "Don't worry, he's fine." Su Zimo smiled gently. There was probably nothing in this ancient battlefield that could hurt Night Spirit. Although there were less than 10 Rakshasas that escaped, all of them fled in different directions. It would indeed take some effort to kill them off completely. The image of Night Spirit's final exchange against the Rakshasa leader flashed through Su Zimo's mind and he fell into deep thought. The Rakshasa leader seemed to have discovered something at the final, critical moment and merely managed to utter 2 words before he was killed by Night Spirit. What was Night Spirit's secret? What was his relationship with the Rakshasa race? Suddenly, Su Zimo's heart stirred and he raised his head. A figure appeared outside the door like a phantom, leaving behind a series of afterimages in his wake. He entered the grand hall without having to step fully onto the ground with his footsteps. It was Night Spirit who was gone for several days. Night Spirit looked well-worn and tired. From the looks of things, he must not have rested for the past few days. "Is everything fine now?" Su Zimo advanced and asked softly. Night Spirit nodded. He looked at Su Zimo's eyes and avoided the latter's gaze. It seemed as though he wanted to speak but held himself back. He was conflicted internally. Honesty should have been a must between brothers, but his secret was way too shocking. He did not know what might change if he revealed it. Su Zimo could read Night Spirit's mind and gave a casual smile before patting the latter on the shoulder. Nothing can stand between us, you don't have to feel troubled. We'll speak again when you feel like you're ready. Yes. Night Spirit felt a burden lifted off his shoulders. Monkey, the spirit tiger and everyone else gathered around with concerned expressions. However, all of them had a tacit understanding and did not press him about his secret. Young master. Right then, Nian arrived beside Su Zimo and bowed deeply towards him. Su Zimo flicked his sleeves and helped her stand with a smile. You've already joined Ethereal Peak, so we can be considered as sect mates. There's no need for such ceremonial acts. Nian shook her head hurriedly and said with a serious expression. No, that won't do. Even though I've joined Ethereal Peak, you are still my benefactor, young master. She paused for a moment and her eyes flickered. Pouting her lips, she said with slight embarrassment, furthermore, I'm your little maidservant. It's only normal for me to greet you as such. Previously, Su Zimo hid in the capital of Great Zhou to avoid the pursuit of the dragon race. There, he founded Mo Spirit Weapon Workshop and adopted Nian. She resided in Mo Spirit Weapon Workshop for more than 2 years during that period of time and assisted Su Zimo with chores and tidying up, staying as a maidservant. There were not many people that knew about it, and Monkey and the others were shocked. The spirit tiger seemed to have thought of something as he stood in a corner and smirked foolishly at Su Zimo, making eyes towards the latter. Little Fox gripped her fists slightly and looked at Nian with a nervous expression. Her body was tense and there was even a hint of hostility in the depths of her eyes. A fragrance wafted over. Demoness G closed in beside Su Zimo with a pitiable expression as she begrudged, I wonder if you need more maidservants by your side, young Master Su. I'm willing to be one too. Cut it out, what are you doing? Su Zimo rolled his eyes and replied curtly. He could naturally tell that Demoness G was teasing him. I'm sorry, young master. Nian pinched the hem of her clothes and said softly with a lowered head, I did not tell the truth and hid my identity from you. Back in the capital of Great Zhou, Su Zimo had already asked Nian about her background. She merely said that her parents were dead and she was homeless without elaborating more about anything else. Su Zimo did not press her further either. Su Zimo waved it off. Your identity is unique, so it's only normal for you to hide it. What's her identity? Shi Jian was confused and looked at little Fatty before asking softly. There's no wonder why you're silly, Jian. Are you foolish or what? Little Fatty face-palmed himself and lamented. In reality, although nobody mentioned it, everyone present was sharp and could roughly guess. Although there were only 7 people from the god race that arrived, the fact that they captured Nian alive instead of killing her was an issue to begin with. She was extremely beautiful with a smooth complexion and exquisite features. A single look at her was enough to surprise anyone. However, the true problem arose when Nian was compared to the 7 god race beings. Her bearings were way too similar to theirs. The only difference was that the god race possessed golden hair that fell like a waterfall while Nian hair was yellow and withered. However, Su Zimo knew. He knew that the difference was non-existent as well. Previously, in the battle at Ethereal Peak, when Nian was pushed to desperation, a mysterious power awakened within her and her combat strength exploded. Her initially withered, yellow hair turned silky smooth as well. That was the only way many questions were resolved. It was why Nian was able to cultivate even without a spirit root. Furthermore, her cultivation speed was extremely fast and she possessed naturally immense strength. It was why she looked the same after more than 20 years and still resembled the young girl from the past. It was because she carried the blood of the god race in her body. The god race had an extremely long lifespan. 20 years was almost negligible in the long lifespan of the god race, and that was why she did not have much changes. Back when Night Spirit first met Nian, he behaved unusually and ran around her to sniff wildly, as though he had discovered something. On hindsight, Night Spirit must have already smelled the aura of the god race from Nian despite the fact that he was only a cub. Nian gaze dimmed as she said softly, however, there are some things that I did not lie to you about, young master. It's true that my parents are dead. My mother is from the god race while my father is a human. Half of the blood that flows through my body is from the god race. Her tone was calm as she explained, but there was a deep hint of sorrow. Because of my impure bloodline, I'm considered as someone from a foreign race within the god race and was an outcast. That was the reason why I escaped and wandered outside homeless. That was the case until I met you, young master. It was not hard to imagine how the young girl before them must have suffered in the hands of the god race without the protection of her parents. Everything is in the past now. Su Zimo consoled her softly with a tender gaze. You only have to remember that from now on, if you don't wish to return, nobody will be able to force you to. Nian Qi pursed her cherry lips when she heard that and her eyes reddened. She almost cried out. Everyone understood what they had to do and dispersed when they saw that. To think that she's from the god race. The Golden Lion looked shocked and murmured as he walked away, "First is truly strong to be able to have a maidservant from the god race. That was one of the primordial 9 races. How domineering were they in Myriad Phenomenon City just a couple of days ago? Who would have thought that Su Zimo already had an underling from the god race more than 20 years ago?" You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.